Chris sighed as he sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee beside his wife, Ashley. They were reviewing their monthly budget, and like the past few months, the numbers just weren't working. Chris was a salesman in a small company, and his pay was mostly from commissions. When the company faced difficulties, it affected him too. "We'll figure this out. I can always take an extra shift at the hospital to help until business picks up," Ashley said gently, running her fingers through Chris's thick brown hair. She had done this since they got married a few years ago. Chris lowered his head and closed his eyes, feeling calm by her touch as he took a deep breath. "You shouldn't have to. I'm supposed to provide for us. Besides, we need to get used to living on one salary. You won't be able to leave your job so we can start a family if we keep needing those extra shifts," Chris replied, squeezing her hand. At 25, they had talked about starting a family for years, but the timing never felt right. They had considered Ashley stopping her birth control soon, but now it seemed they might struggle to make their mortgage payment, and having a baby felt far away. "Many women work and still care for their families, you know," she said with a smile as she stood up and kissed Chris's neck. Chris released her hand and leaned into her kiss, wrapping his hands around the chair. "Not my wife. She deserves a break from the daily grind. Besides, I can only imagine the attention you get when people see you in scrubs." He playfully squeezed her side, making Ashley smile. "That's true," she said, still teasing. "I do have a good way with my patients." As she spoke, she let her fingers glide down Chris's shirt. "Would you like to hear about how Nurse Ashley takes special care of her favorite patients?" She playfully nudged him. "You're something else, you know that?" Chris laughed. Just then, his phone started ringing, pulling them back to reality. "Answer that. I need to get to work anyway. I have patients waiting for me," she said, winking before heading to the shower. When Ashley came out of the shower, Chris was already focused on work. Chris was deep in work, with his files spread across the kitchen table, and he was on a work call, busy going over sales numbers and strategies. When Ashley entered, they exchanged warm smiles as he continued his intense conversation with the people on the other end. She watched him for a moment, admiring his focused demeanor. She wished she had more time before her shift at the hospital to spend a few moments with him once his call ended, but she was already running late. Thankfully, it was Friday, so they had plans for a special date night to look forward to. As she got dressed for work, she could still hear Chris talking in the other room, speaking firmly to a junior sales employee about the need to improve performance. Smiling to herself, she finished getting ready, then mouthed a quick, "I love you," as she headed out the door. Throughout her 8-hour shift, Ashley found herself smiling, thinking about the little jokes and sweet moments she and Chris had shared before she left. She even texted him during a brief break. "Can't wait for date night tonight. Feels like today's extra special." He responded quickly, making her grin at the thought of their evening together. While she was heading down the hospital hallway to see her next patient, she passed by the maintenance staff who smiled politely as she went by. Chuckling softly, she thought of the teasing texts she'd sent to Chris and felt glad for their little inside jokes. Just then, her phone buzzed with another text from Chris, but she quickly put it back in her pocket, reminding herself to stay focused. "Are you all right, dear? You look a bit surprised," came the gentle voice of her elderly patient, Mrs. Johnson, who noticed her slight distraction as Ashley entered the room. Ashley apologized with a light laugh, explaining that she'd just received a funny text from her husband. "Oh, dear, I was married for 43 years, Mrs. Johnson said, smiling. "It's important to keep the joy alive. My Robert always knew how to bring a smile to my face." Ashley laughed, blushing slightly. "Sounds like he was quite the character," she replied warmly. They shared a laugh, and Ashley felt grateful for the wisdom and light-hearted advice Mrs. Johnson had shared. With that, she was reminded of the many things to appreciate in her life, especially her relationship with Chris, as she continued her day, looking forward to their date night ahead. Anything to get the excitement going? Ashley couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of her 87-year-old patient with 2 bad knees and a new hip showing up at a club for couples. "You're too funny. I love Chris and would do anything he asks, but I think we shouldn't go that far. Besides, He means more than enough to me, she said with a playful smile. Don't be silly. It's not wrong if you both agree to it. Trust me, dear, I thought Robert was everything I needed too, until I figured out he wasn't. The elderly lady laughed again as Ashley checked her blood pressure. She wanted to tell Chris about this because she was sure he would find it amusing. Your health looks good, Mrs. Johnson. Dr. Stevens will be in soon to talk about your surgery and try to schedule it in the next month or so. Just try to stay out of mischief until then, she said with a smile as she got ready to leave her favorite patient's room. Whatever you say, dear. Do me a favor and let Dr. Stevens know I'm a bit uncomfortable in this gown. Ashley could only laugh as she left the room and continued her work. The rest of the day went smoothly for Ashley, except for feeling a bit distracted. As she said goodbye to her colleagues and friends, she sent Chris another text. Heading home to freshen up. What's our plan for tonight? Once again, her husband's response came quickly. Sorry, babe, it was a long day and money is tight. How about we just postpone? Ashley bit her lip, thinking about what to say next. She knew Chris was stressed about finances, but she was really looking forward to a night out. Plus, she hoped it would lift his spirits. What if we skip dinner and go to that bar you like, McDuff's? One drink, then we'll leave. I promise it'll be worth it. She waited a few minutes for his reply. After a while, she started to think he might not be interested. But about 10 minutes later, a message came through. Sorry, I was in the shower. You really know how to make me happy. A drink at McDuff's sounds perfect. See you soon. Ashley smiled to herself. She disliked feeling like she was pushing her husband, but a night out might help ease some of the stress around money. McDuff's was a typical local bar. Built in the mid-90s by a man going through a tough time, it became a special place for him. Besides the bar, there were a few tables at the back, 2 pool tables, and a small dance floor where locals would dance when there was live music or a fun song played on the jukebox. Chris and his friends used to come here when they were younger. The owner never asked for IDs, making it a favorite hangout. Ashley and Chris walked into McDuff's, a dimly lit bar filled with the smell of old beer and the sounds of laughter. They found a small table in the back, and Ashley sat down with a smile, nudging Chris playfully. Chris managed a small smile, but still looked worried. I don't know, Ash. I'm just not really feeling up for a night out. Work has been really stressful, and with money being tight. Ashley reached across the table and took his hand. I get it, but we can't let all this stress take over our lives. We deserve a break, even if it's just for tonight. Chris sighed, giving in a bit. Okay, you win. Let's make it a quick one, though. As they settled in, Ashley noticed Chris was still distracted. She tried to lighten the mood. Do I need to remind you of the fun waiting for you at home if you come out with me tonight? She teased him as the bartender approached to take their drink orders. Chris chuckled, his mood lightening a little. Oh, I remember, but I never mind your reminders. They ordered drinks, and while they waited, Ashley continued chatting, trying to cheer Chris up. When their drinks arrived, Ashley raised her glass. To us to tonight and to leaving our worries behind. Chris smiled and clinked his glass with hers. To us. As they enjoyed their drinks, Ashley noticed Chris seemed more relaxed and playful. She felt happy she had brought him out. Just then, someone called out from the bar. Chris, is that you? Chris looked up to see a familiar face he hadn't seen in years. It was Clayton, his friend's older brother. Clayton, always full of energy, smiled widely as he came over. Clayton, hey! Chris stood up to greet him with a hug. Long time no see. This is my wife, Ashley. Ashley stood up and shook Clayton's hand, smiling. Nice to meet you, Clayton. Clayton's eyes lit up as he looked at Ashley. Wow, Chris, you really found a gem. She's beautiful. Chris laughed, feeling proud. I know I'm a lucky guy. They all sat down and Clayton focused on Chris. So, what brings you two here tonight? Chris hesitated for a moment. Just needed a night out. Work's been hard and money's a bit tight. Clayton nodded, understanding. I get it. A lot of people are dealing with the same stuff. I'm back in town because I just created a new app I think will really help small businesses. Unfortunately, I had to let go of most of my sales team because they weren't doing well, so I'm now stuck making sales calls and demos myself. I don't have time to work on the product. But let's not focus on that right now. Tonight is all about having fun and catching up with old and new friends. He smiled as he glanced at Ashley. As the night continued, the three of them laughed and shared stories, remembering good times from the past. Ashley was happy to see Chris's spirits lift and enjoyed seeing him have a good time. She understood that their problems wouldn't vanish quickly, but moments like this were really special. It was nice to see Chris out and having fun. She didn't know much about Clayton yet, but he seemed nice. While chatting, Clayton brought up their old friendly wagers from when they were younger. "Do you remember those bets we used to make, Chris? If you won, you got what you wanted, but if you lost, I could ask for something in the future." Chris chuckled as he recalled the past. "Yeah, I remember that. What are you thinking?" Clayton grinned playfully. "I suggest we make a friendly wager. If you win, I'll give you something you want, but if you lose, I'll get to ask for something later." Ashley intervened, smiling with curiosity. "Hold on, are you saying you guys made bets without knowing the full details? Weren't you worried it might go too far or that someone might back out?" She enjoyed listening since she thought she knew all of Chris's childhood stories, but this was new. Maybe it was the drinks, but she was eager to learn more about Chris's past. Did he have a wild side she hadn't seen? Chris laughed while taking a sip of his drink. "Well, when you say it like that, it sounds reckless. We were just kids trying to act cool. No one ever got hurt." "Well, that's not exactly true. There was that one time I flirted with your mom." Chris nearly choked on his drink as he remembered. "Yeah, and if I remember right, she was not pleased and definitely put you in your place." Clayton rolled his eyes. "Come on, she was just playing along. She only reacted like that because you were there," he said with a wink at Ashley. "We never had to worry about backing out of bets. It was just how things worked. Once you joined in, you followed through." Chris raised an eyebrow, bringing the focus back to what was happening now. "All right, so what's the bet?" Clayton smiled and pointed to a cute redhead at the bar. "All you need to do is go over there and get her number for me." "Just a quick test to see if you're still up for it," Clayton said, looking at Ashley. "He used to be a great wingman back in the day." "I believe it. He's quite charming," Ashley replied, playfully squeezing her husband's thigh as she listened to the two friends joke around. Chris glanced at Ashley, who was already giggling. "I don't mind, Chris. Go ahead," she encouraged. Chris nodded, a determined look on his face as he finished his beer. "All right, but if I win, you make me the new head of sales for your new app," he said with a grin, as Clayton agreed. He walked over to the redhead at the bar and started talking to her. Ashley watched from the table, amused by his new confidence. Once Chris got to the bar, Clayton moved over to sit next to Ashley. "So, tell me more about you two. How did you meet?" he asked, trying not to focus too much on her dress. "Oh, it's a classic story," Ashley said with a smile, watching her husband buy a drink for the redhead and point back at their table. "I was in nursing school and working a shift in the ER. Chris came in for a concussion from football. I asked him about his injury, and he spent the whole time trying to impress me. Eventually, I told him if he would be serious about my questions, I'd go to dinner with him. The rest is history." "Wow, smart and beautiful. Chris really got lucky with you, didn't he?" "Oh, you're too kind," Ashley said, playfully tapping Clayton's knee. She suddenly felt a wave of warmth and crossed her legs, briefly embarrassed. Clayton noticed her reaction and couldn't help but smile, recognizing the effect he had on her. After a moment of quietness, Chris returned to the table with a proud smile as Clayton got up and returned to his original spot. "Got it!" Clayton felt impressed, but not overly so. He had been with the girl before. "Nice job, my friend. Here's my card. Call me on Monday and we'll discuss that job." As Clayton hugged them goodbye, Ashley felt a strong presence against her again. Tonight had been more than just an outing. It was a welcome break from their daily troubles, a time to enjoy laughter and fun. As they left McDuff's, Ashley wrapped her arm around her husband and leaned in close. "Let's get home quickly," she whispered with a playful smile. Chris grinned back and picked up the pace as they made their way down the street. When they got inside, she tossed her coat on a chair and pulled Chris into a warm embrace, giving him a kiss. "I'm so happy to finally have a night together," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "You're in a great mood tonight," he said with a laugh, hugging her tightly. "What's got you so happy?" "Just you," she replied, smiling as they relaxed in each other's arms. She thought back to something Mrs. Johnson had said earlier that day about keeping things fun in a marriage, and it made her laugh. She wasn't sure how Chris would respond if she told him about the funny bits of advice she'd heard from her elderly patient, but she loved that they could always be honest with each other. Chris gave her a curious look. "What's so funny?" "Oh, I just remembered something a patient said. You know how people sometimes just surprise you," she said with a smile. "Tell me about it," he replied, laughing softly as they enjoyed a quiet moment together. She realized how grateful she was for nights like these, and for Chris's easygoing warmth. They spent the rest of the evening unwinding together, sharing stories and laughs about their week, enjoying the simple joy of each other's company. As they finally settled in, Ashley thought back to all the small moments that made her relationship with Chris so meaningful. As they walked out of the bar, Chris and Ashley laughed arm in arm, enjoying the night air and the lighthearted conversation they shared. There was something fun and playful about the evening. They both felt a spark that reminded them of when they first met. Ashley gave him a quick teasing look, saying, "Let's hurry home. I've missed you this week." Chris chuckled, picking up the pace, eager to enjoy their time together. Once they reached home, Ashley tossed her coat onto a chair and pulled Chris close, wrapping her arms around him with a warm smile. "You're in a good mood tonight," he said, smiling back as he held her tight. They hadn't had a night like this in a while, and it felt refreshing to both of them. She gave him a playful nudge, teasingly whispering about how they'd caught each other exchanging glances throughout the evening. As they settled in, Ashley thought back to the funny stories she had heard from her patient Mrs. Johnson earlier that day about keeping marriage interesting. She chuckled to herself, realizing how simple moments of humor and closeness could make such a big difference. "What's so funny?" Chris asked, sensing her light mood. "Oh, just some advice I got from a patient today," she said with a grin, leaving it at that. They spent the rest of the night laughing, talking, and sharing memories, cherishing the moments of joy they found in each other's company. When they finally settled down, Ashley felt grateful for the laughter and closeness they had shared and looked forward to more nights like this together. As they lay together in the quiet of their room, Chris pulled Ashley close, feeling a deep connection in their shared silence. They had spent the evening reconnecting, savoring each other's presence. Chris leaned in, giving her a gentle, lingering kiss, and Ashley smiled, enjoying the warmth and closeness of the moment. "Tonight was special," she murmured, her voice soft. Chris nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I think it's been a while since we had a night like this," he replied, looking at her with a sense of appreciation. They settled into a comfortable quiet, each reflecting on how much they valued these simple, shared moments. Both felt grateful to have set aside the time to unwind and be present with each other, away from the day-to-day stress and busyness. As they finally drifted off, Chris reached for Ashley's hand, holding it gently as they closed their eyes, at peace with the shared comfort and love that came from just being together. "That was something else," Chris said softly. Ashley, too exhausted to open her eyes, murmured in agreement, settling deeper into her pillow with a tired smile. Yeah." They lay there in comfortable silence, each wrapped in their thoughts, grateful for the peaceful moment. Chris smiled, feeling closer to Ashley than ever, and was already looking forward to spending another relaxed evening together soon. In the early morning light, Chris woke up to find Ashley already awake, giving him a cheerful, "Good morning." She'd thoughtfully prepared coffee and sat beside him as he slowly woke up, still feeling the contentment of their shared moments the night before. As he stretched, he took her hand, feeling a rush of gratitude. "How did I get so lucky?" he whispered, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. They both laughed softly, enjoying the quiet and warmth of the morning, feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day together. As they lay together, Chris looked over at Ashley with a smile. "What did I do to deserve such a great morning?" he asked, grinning as he turned to face her. She returned his smile, holding his gaze. "Just thought you deserved a special start to your day," she replied warmly. Chris looked thoughtful, recalling the closeness they'd shared the night before. "Last night was something else," he said, a hint of wonder in his voice. It's amazing how we can still have such fun together after all this time. Ashley chuckled, reaching out to hold his hand. That's what I love about us, she said. We can be open with each other, sharing thoughts and dreams. It's like we're always exploring something new together. Chris nodded, visibly grateful for the honesty and connection they shared. I can't explain it, he admitted. Maybe it's just the trust we have, the way we can talk about anything. Ashley gave his hand a squeeze. Exactly. The important thing is that we're open and honest with each other. That's what makes it work, she said softly. They shared a comfortable silence, both grateful for the deep connection that had grown between them over time. It was a moment of understanding and trust, one that reminded them why they were such a strong team. I'm excited to find out what other dreams you have, she said with a gentle touch, as she gave him one last kiss on the chest before getting out of bed to start her day. As Ashley got ready for her shift at the hospital, her mind kept drifting back to her talk with Chris. She had always thought of herself as open and willing to try new things, but the idea of discovering his dreams with him made her feel a thrill she hadn't expected. Clayton walked into his small but efficient office, nestled in a busy part of town. His team mostly consisted of salespeople and did not need much space, but he liked being close to them to supervise. Even on a Saturday, he was glad to see them working hard. His app was great, but it needed to be promoted actively. That was the reason he had hired Chris. And it also helped that Chris's wife was very attractive, far beyond his reach. Clayton smiled, recalling how she had accidentally brushed against him the night before. He felt a rush at the thought of having more control over her, but work needed his attention, so he set those thoughts aside. As Clayton walked by Katie's desk, he saw her quickly close a window on her computer when she spotted him. This reminded him of Katie's student loans, which she had taken on before joining the company. With a friendly smile, he approached her. Katie, could you come to my office for a moment? She looked worried but followed him to his office, where he closed the door. Please sit down, he said, motioning to the chair in front of his desk. He took his time walking to his chair, letting her feel anxious. Katie, you seem a bit distracted at work lately. It feels like you've lost focus. Loyalty is very important to me. Katie's eyes widened and tears began to form. She was struggling to make ends meet, and losing her job was not an option. Sir, I promise I'm dedicated to this job. I just signed 3 small businesses to try our product, and I believe they will become paying customers soon. Clayton remained calm, knowing he had the upper hand. But trials do not bring in money, and I need results. He softened his expression and smiled gently at her. I like to think of myself as fair. I know about your student loans, so maybe we can turn this around. I'm willing to give you another chance if you can show me your loyalty. Can you do that, Katie? Can you be loyal to me? Katie wiped her tears and gave her boss a small smile in return. Yes, sir. Anything you need. I promise you won't regret it. I will be the most loyal person in the company. Katie quickly jumped from her chair and gave Clayton a big hug. He smiled to himself as he returned the hug. The girl has no idea what she just agreed to, he thought, as he waved her goodbye from his office. Clayton spent the rest of the day in his office reading emails and checking the sales numbers for his team. His product was becoming more popular, but to really grow and attract investors, they needed to partner with larger companies and secure better deals. He hoped that hiring Chris would help with this. At the same time, he thought about other ways to encourage success. Just then, he found a lead that piqued his interest. The Morgan Group was a local company with about 3,000 employees currently trying out the product. He decided to call their CTO, Jack, to see how things were going with the trial. Once the secretary connected Jack, Clayton put on his best smile and took a deep breath. Hey, Jack, it's Clayton calling, your neighborhood software expert. How's our favorite customer today? Clayton's voice was warm and friendly with a touch of playfulness. Oh, hi, Clayton. I'm doing well, thanks. How about you? Jack replied, sounding pleasantly surprised by the call. I'm fantastic, Jack. Thanks for asking. I just wanted to check in on the trial. Any feedback? Clayton asked, genuinely interested in Jack's experience. Jack chuckled. Well, I have to say, Clayton, I'm impressed. The software is really making a difference and has already found 3 security issues. It's definitely saving us time, but the price is a bit of a problem. I'm just not sure I can get it approved. Clayton grinned at the positive feedback and, undeterred by the cost concern, quickly searched for information that could help. "That's great to hear, Jack. I'm glad we could help with your security." Clayton continued as he found what he needed. "I'm sorry to hear about the price issue. You know, I had similar feedback from Our Lady Mary Day School, but after a few talks with their headmaster, I was able to help them see the benefits and even work in some savings for them." There was a long pause on the other end of the call as Clayton's smile grew. "Oh, you work with Our Lady? I've been trying to get our daughter on their waiting list for a while. What a small world." Clayton smiled, agreeing that it was indeed a small world. "Well, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I could definitely put in a good word for you. Regardless of whether you choose to join us or not," he said, even though they both knew that wasn't true. "That would be great. My wife will be excited. Let me check our budget again and see what changes we can make. I'll get back to you soon." With that, the conversation ended, leaving Clayton feeling pleased as he began looking into Our Lady Mary Day School to see if he could get them interested in his product. As Ashley headed to the hospital for her next shift, she couldn't shake off the strong memories of the night before. Chris seemed back to normal, but she couldn't ignore the nagging worry that things had gone too far. Their talk that morning had helped, but she was still dealing with her own feelings. She realized she didn't find Clayton's confidence appealing, yet something from the previous night bothered her, though she couldn't quite figure out what it was. Despite these thoughts swirling in her mind, she pushed them aside as she entered the hospital. Walking through the busy halls, Ashley felt the weight of last night's events and the curious looks from her coworkers. As she turned a corner, she bumped into the janitor from yesterday, letting out a surprised gasp as she stumbled backward. The janitor, surprisingly quick, caught her and helped her regain her balance. Before she could think about what had just happened, she was back on her feet, and he stepped back. "I'm sorry, I should really watch where I'm going," Ashley said quickly, offering a shy smile as she hurried past him into the staff room, shutting the door behind her. Heart racing, Ashley took a moment to calm down before leaving the staff room. She was relieved to find the janitor gone as she began her rounds, trying to push the events of the last 24 hours out of her mind. Still, her feelings were all mixed up, swinging from guilt to sadness to a strange excitement she couldn't ignore. As she struggled with these emotions, she entered Mrs. Johnson's room and nearly bumped into Dr. Stevens. "Someone seems distracted today. What's happening, dear?" Mrs. Johnson said, watching Dr. Stevens as he left. "Don't you ever behave?" Ashley replied with a smile as she checked the old lady's vitals. "With a charming man like that around, no wonder you're flustered." "It's not him. It's not anyone here. Ashley noticed Mrs. Johnson's eyebrow raise and realized she had said too much. She was foolish to think she could come in and just work without the old lady noticing something was off. For her age, Mrs. Johnson was still quite sharp. "Come on, dear Cher, I don't have much longer left." Ashley sighed and filled out the chart on the computer nearby. Ashley sat on Johnson's bed, looking around the room to make sure they had privacy. "I don't know," she said, pausing to think. "You mentioned before that you and Mr. Johnson like to pretend in different scenarios, right? Did it ever go as far as imagining he was someone else you both knew?" Mrs. Johnson smiled and looked at Ashley. "We've done more than just pretend, dear. What's troubling you? Are you worried he might be thinking about other women?" "No, not another woman." Ashley looked down, feeling shy as she shared what had happened the night before with her favorite patient. Mrs. Johnson listened closely, her eyes shining as Ashley spoke about Clayton, the new job, and the conversations they had. When Ashley finished, she looked up to see Mrs. Johnson smiling warmly, almost like a mother, as she took the young nurse's hand. "It sounds like you two had an exciting night." Ashley blushed, feeling overwhelmed by her thoughts about Clayton. Mrs. Johnson's kind words gave Ashley some comfort, but they also made her feel more confused and guilty. "It was really intense. I didn't expect him to mention Clayton, but once he did, he was all I could think about," she admitted, her cheeks turning warm. "Was it him you were thinking about or something else?" Mrs. Johnson asked with a playful smile, causing Ashley's face to turn even redder. "It's nothing to be upset about, dear. It seems like your husband enjoyed it too. Some people actually like watching their partner with someone else. It can be quite thrilling for them. No, it's not like that. It was all just a daydream. He would never want someone else to really be with me. Are you sure? Have you asked him? And what about you? It seems like you were intrigued by the idea. Some people say it's exhilarating, it's a unique experience. Mrs. Johnson's eyes sparkled as she reminisced about her past. Ashley reminded her of her younger self in many ways. Mrs. Johnson sensed that the young wife would have plenty of new stories to share in the future. Ashley stood up suddenly, feeling unsettled. Chris loved her. Why would he want to see her with someone else, especially someone like Clayton? As Ashley left Mrs. Johnson's room, her mind was in chaos. Mrs. Johnson's words had stirred up feelings of guilt, curiosity, and desire. The thought of Chris wanting someone else to be close to her seemed absurd, yet the excitement she felt lingered. Walking down the hospital corridors, Ashley tried to push these thoughts away. She couldn't understand why Mrs. Johnson's words had such a deep impact on her. Chris loved her. She was certain of it. The idea of him wanting to see her with someone else was hard to understand. When Ashley entered the break room, she tried to pay attention to her surroundings. The room was quiet and empty. A nice break from the busy hospital outside. She sat at the table and took a deep breath, hoping to calm her racing thoughts. Lost in thought, the door opened, and the janitor she had seen earlier walked in. Her heart raced when their eyes met, and he gave her a small smile. She recalled the brief moment they shared. Was there a pull towards him she didn't understand? Shaking her head to clear her mind, Ashley stood up quickly. She needed to leave and think. Without saying anything, she walked out of the break room, feeling more confused than ever. As she walked through the hospital, Ashley felt as if someone was watching her. The day's events had left her feeling uncertain and uneasy. She needed to talk to Chris to share everything that had happened and to reassure herself that their love was strong enough to face any doubts. Finding a quiet spot, Ashley took out her phone and called Chris. When the phone rang, she felt a wave of relief. No matter what happened, she knew Chris would always support her. "How's my amazing wife doing today?" Chris said after the second ring, and hearing his voice eased her worries. "Hey, babe, I just wanted to check in. I've missed you a lot today." "I've missed you too. You left before I could thank you for what we shared this morning." Ashley felt a flutter of emotions. With everything that happened today, she tried to settle her thoughts. "You can make it up to me when I get home, just the two of us, please. No other thoughts, just us." "Sounds good," Chris replied, sensing a shift in her tone. "You know I love you, right?" Ashley sighed in relief. She was just overthinking. Their love was as strong as ever. She just needed to clear her mind. "I love you too, sweetie. See you soon." On Monday morning, Chris woke up early, excited to begin his new job. He wanted to get to the office and make a good first impression. When he arrived at the small office building, he noticed several cars were already parked, even though it was only 8 a.m. Stepping inside, he admired the modern decor. The building had an open layout with large cubicles spread out. Looking around, he appreciated the wall art, which was all abstract and colorful. The cubicles were painted a soft gray with large desks and colorful motivational posters on the walls. At the side of the building, there were 2 big rooms that looked like they were used for meetings. Each room had a large table in the center surrounded by a dozen chairs. The walls were equipped with whiteboards and screens for presentations. In the back of the building, there was a larger office without any windows. As Chris looked around, Clayton emerged from this office with a smile. Behind him walked a young woman looking nervous. She hurried back to her desk, adjusting her glasses that slipped down her nose. "Chris, I'm glad you could come. Welcome to our team," Clayton said as he walked over and offered his hand. "I've told everyone about your arrival, and they are excited to work with you." Chris smiled as he shook Clayton's hand. He felt a thrill at the new opportunity ahead. Before today, he had researched the company online and was impressed by what Clayton had created. Bitgarden had developed an app that helped manage and monitor employee devices and checked other connected devices for possible threats, blocking any harmful communication. Although some had concerns about privacy and data access, Chris saw the potential for something groundbreaking. Clayton introduced Chris to the small team. They talked briefly about upcoming deals and the need to secure some important clients. Chris learned about a possible deal with the Morgan Group and how Clayton was working hard to earn their business. He made a mental note about the deal value and challenged himself to surpass it in the future. As they finished the tour, they stopped in front of the young woman he had seen earlier. She glanced up shyly and greeted him nervously. Up close, her deep green eyes looked sad and her face was covered in freckles. She appeared quite young. "This is our star sales representative, Katie. She's a fast learner, and I think she'll do great in her career. I expect you two to work closely together, and you might even guide her a bit," Clayton said. Katie fidgeted in her chair as Clayton spoke. Chris sensed there was something more to her situation, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Maybe she was just a bit worried about meeting her new boss, Chris thought, as he took the cube next to hers and started organizing his accounts. The rest of the day flew by with meetings and data as Chris tried his hardest to catch up. BitGuardian had many big companies interested in their product, but not many were turning their trial runs into subscriptions. Chris worked on understanding why this was happening and hoped by the week's end he could present Clayton with a plan to help reach more users. He quickly downloaded the app on his phone and started exploring some features to understand the feedback from customers better. Overall, he felt today was very productive and was just packing up when Clayton called him into his office. As Chris entered, he noticed how nice the office was. The walls were a calm blue, a big change from the gray of the main office. The desk looked strong and sturdy, made of red oak. There were 2 cozy chairs in front of it. In the corner, a large leather sofa made him think if Clayton ever worked late on it. Next to the sofa, there seemed to be a big closet that might hold another desk if needed. A door in the back of the room had an exit sign above it, allowing Clayton to come and go as he pleased throughout the day. "I wanted to check in with you as we get close to the end of the day and see how you think your first day went," Clayton said, getting right to the point as he put his feet up on the desk. "It was great. Everyone seems really professional. I looked through the sales list and I'm starting to gather concerns people have so we can improve our conversion rates." Clayton nodded, pleased, but his thoughts drifted to Ashley. "And BitGuardian, did you download it? It's important we demonstrate our product and show our customers there is nothing to worry about." Chris held up his phone, smiling. "Yes, it was one of the first things I did. I've used it most of the morning. I have to say this is impressive technology." "Thanks. I just wish the critics would stop spreading false information about it. The idea that we would secretly access someone's device on the same network to steal data is just fear-mongering from people who are afraid of change." Chris nodded in agreement. He wasn't very tech-savvy, but he didn't quite see what the issue was either. He didn't fully grasp how much control the app gave companies over their employees' devices, but he believed that if they weren't doing anything wrong, they shouldn't mind some extra monitoring for the sake of safety. "Listen, the main reason I called you back here is to invite you and Ashley for dinner at my place tonight. It's important to me that you both feel at home here," Clayton said warmly. "That's too much, man. You've already done so much for us." "We wouldn't want to impose," Chris replied. Clayton held up his hand to stop him. "Nonsense. I do this for every new employee and I won't take no for an answer. I'll send you the address. Come over around 7:30. We'll have dinner, maybe a little wine, and chat about our new partnership." Chris knew he couldn't refuse, and honestly, he didn't want to. Ashley didn't enjoy cooking, so going out would surely make her happy. He also thought about how much fun they had the last time they spent the evening with Clayton. "I'll let her know. I'm sure she'll be excited for a break from the kitchen." He thanked Clayton again for everything he'd done for them. As Chris adjusted his tie in the mirror, he watched Ashley searching through her clothes for the right outfit. He smiled as he saw her trying on a stylish dress. "You know, you don't have to put in so much effort. You always look great," Chris said, walking over to her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Ashley leaned into him, turning to meet his eyes. "I just want to make a good impression. Your boss is really important." Chris chuckled, leaning in to kiss her softly. "You're amazing. How do you always know the right things to say?" Ashley felt her cheeks warm at his compliment. "Well, I guess sometimes it just takes a little charm," she said playfully. They shared another sweet kiss, and Chris pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "I mean it, Ashley. You mean everything to me." "I love you too, Chris," she said, smiling back at him. "Now, let me finish getting ready for you." She gave him a final kiss on the cheek, and then gently pushed him back as she reached for her top. When they were both ready, Chris was even more amazed by her beauty. She wore a short black dress that hugged her figure perfectly and showed off some of her neckline. The dress ended just above her knees, which made her long legs look stunning as she walked across the room in her high heels. As they arrived at Clayton's house, Ashley felt a wave of nerves wash over her. She had only met Clayton once before at the bar, and he had been nothing but nice to her. Still, she felt that in such a short time, the line between reality and fantasy was starting to blur. The evening began pleasantly, with friendly conversation and tasty food. But as the night went on, Ashley noticed that Clayton seemed to watch her closely. Clayton was his usual charming self, with a smile that could brighten anyone's day. Yet tonight, there seemed to be a playful look in his eyes that made Ashley's heart race. She felt self-conscious when she caught Clayton looking her way, especially when Chris made a light-hearted comment. There was something about the attention that made her blush, and she could sense that there was more going on than it appeared. "Do you want another drink, Ashley?" Clayton asked, his voice smooth. "No, thank you. I'm good," Ashley replied, trying to stay calm. Clayton leaned in a little closer. "Are you sure? It's a special drink made just for tonight." Ashley felt a mix of excitement and nerves at his closeness, but knew she should step back. Nevertheless, Clayton's confidence was captivating. She glanced at Chris for support, and he smiled encouragingly. "Maybe just a small glass," Ashley said, feeling warmth in her cheeks. As Clayton poured her a drink, their fingers briefly touched, sending a strange thrill through her. She quickly pulled back and took a sip of her drink to steady herself. "Thank you," she said, attempting to sound relaxed. "My pleasure," Clayton replied with a warm smile. "I like to make sure everyone enjoys themselves." He added a playful wink, which made her cough softly. "How about a little game?" he asked, his focus shifting back to Chris. "What do you have in mind?" Chris asked, taking a drink while Ashley tried to gather herself again. She was relieved that the attention was off her for a moment. Clayton's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I have some tequila in the kitchen. Whoever drinks 12 shots first wins, just like we used to." It had been a long time since Chris had tequila, and he realized he might regret that decision in the morning. He took pride in never backing down from a challenge, so he wasn't going to start now. "All right, but if I win, I get to go to that big security conference in Vegas next week." "Vegas? I want to go," Ashley complained, as Clayton filled her glass again without asking. "And Ashley gets to come with me," he added. Clayton thought for a moment before nodding. "Deal? But there will be a lot of people at that conference, so you better be ready." The two friends shook hands to seal the bet. Clayton then set up 2 rows of shot glasses on the kitchen counter. "Take it slow. I don't want any mess on my floor." Ashley was chosen to keep an eye on the competition in case it was very close. She sipped her wine, feeling nervous as the 2 men got ready. She had never seen Chris drink like this before, so she was unsure of what would happen. But the idea of a trip to Las Vegas excited her. When Ashley said go, the 2 friends began downing their shots. Clayton started strong, but after the 3rd shot, he needed a moment to catch his breath. This gave Chris a chance to catch up and take the lead. Ashley watched anxiously, sipping her wine to calm her nerves. Clayton smiled to himself, pleased with his plan. He pretended to struggle after his 8th shot, which seemed to energize Chris as he finished the last 3 shots easily, making Ashley jump with joy. The room was already spinning for Chris, and when Ashley leaped into his arms, he barely managed to hold her up without falling over. "Good job!" she exclaimed, kissing him on the lips. Chris grinned back at her. "Wow, I honestly thought I had you for a bit. I can't believe you could drink that much," Clayton said, pulling Chris back to reality. He smiled back at his friend, still cheerful. "It's getting late, and you 2 are clearly too tipsy to drive. I'll get the sofa ready for you to sleep here tonight." Chris opened his mouth to complain, but the room spun again, making him realize it was pointless. Instead, he slowly got up from the floor and lifted Ashley, who was also swaying after finishing a whole bottle of wine. "I guess that's for the best," he said a bit too loudly, starting to giggle for no reason. While Clayton went to prepare the bed, Ashley kissed her husband again. "I can't believe we finally get to go to Vegas. We've talked about it for so long. I need to call work tomorrow and make sure my time off is approved. But it should be simple." Chris kissed her back gently, his fingers moving softly on her side. "I'm really happy, sweetheart. It feels like things are finally going our way." Ashley agreed and kissed his neck softly, feeling the effects of the wine from earlier. It's like a dream come true. Maybe I should go into the living room and show Clayton how much we appreciate him. She joked as she noticed Chris react to her playful words. You're playful. Did you notice how he kept looking at you all night? It was like he couldn't take his eyes off you, Chris replied, his fingers still moving warmly by her side. It's too bad he only watched. Maybe I would have been tempted if he had acted. Ashley teased, feeling Chris get caught up in the fun of the moment. Just outside the kitchen, Clayton was observing. If Chris had looked up, he would have seen Clayton return to the room. He admired Ashley quietly, noticing how her dress shifted. Beautiful, he said softly to himself, wishing he could hear their conversation but could only catch bits of it. He didn't want to make the couple uncomfortable, so he took a step back before walking into the kitchen. The sofa bed is ready for you. If you need me, I'll be upstairs, first door on your left, he said as he came back into the kitchen. Ashley was leaning against the table to keep her balance, while Chris leaned against the counter, smiling widely. Thanks again for tonight. You've been a wonderful host and have built a great team, Chris said. Not at all. Thank you both. I'm really glad you decided to join us. I can't wait to get to know you better, Clayton replied, looking at Ashley, causing her to glance away in shyness. After he went upstairs, Chris and Ashley moved to the spacious living room and settled down, turning on the TV to calm their excitement. As the movie started, Ashley cuddled up next to Chris, placing her hand on his leg. I had a lot of fun tonight. Your boss seemed to really enjoy himself, she said, playfully emphasizing her words. Chris chuckled and put his hand on her thigh. Oh, I bet he did. You didn't seem to mind the attention much either, he joked back with a smile. What can I say? There's something thrilling about having two guys think about me. I bet he's up there right now thinking about it. She spoke softly in his ear, her fingers slowly moving up his leg. She felt his heart start to race, unsure if it was because of her words or her touch. As she moved her hand, she could sense his reaction. Well, what do we have here? She laughed lightly, teasing him. What can I say? Clayton wasn't the only one who noticed how charming you are. Ashley leaned in closer, her hand now resting gently on him. Good answer, she said with a smile. Their lips met softly as they explored each other, recalling the events of the evening. Chris touched Ashley's face, gently playing with her hair. He held her close, his fingers grazing the back of her neck. Suddenly, he pulled her closer, making her let out a soft sound. Their kisses grew more intense. Ashley felt his energy and matched it, feeling connected as they moved together. She enjoyed the closeness, feeling wrapped in warmth. She savored their kisses, taking her time. As they shared this moment, Ashley reached down, wanting to deepen their connection. She fumbled a bit but finally found a way to touch him, feeling his excitement grow. Chris broke the kiss, taking a deep breath as they shared this new level of intimacy. The atmosphere around them was charged, and they both felt alive in this shared moment. After a minute, Ashley realized the need for more space. Maybe we should move somewhere else, she suggested playfully. Clayton is right upstairs, Chris reminded, raising an eyebrow. You're right. Maybe I should go see him instead, she teased back, enjoying the playful banter. Under normal circumstances, Ashley would never have spoken like this. Perhaps it was the effect of the evening's playful mood or just the lighthearted vibe between them. Chris caught her mischievous smile and laughed, matching her playful energy. Ashley settled beside him on the floor of their makeshift living room setup, and the two shared a moment of genuine closeness. They held each other's gaze, both caught up in a mix of laughter and warmth as they continued to chat about their day, allowing themselves to let go and simply enjoy each other's company. Chris, sensing her happiness, reached over for the remote to pause the movie they had half-heartedly been watching, ensuring they wouldn't get distracted from the time they were sharing. Ashley's genuine laughter filled the room as they continued to exchange jokes, leaning into the connection they'd built. Playfully adjusting her dress, she joked with a glint in her eye. You know, tonight's been a little different than our usual Fridays. Chris chuckled. Yeah, but I can't say I'm complaining. You're always surprising me. Their laughter softened, and as they sat close together, they enjoyed the quiet comfort of the moment. Ashley felt grateful for their openness and the ease they shared, and Chris couldn't help but smile, thankful for her sense of humor and warmth. As they sat together, Ashley could see the excitement and warmth in Chris's eyes, matching the feeling she held in her own heart. Chris was taken aback, surprised by the way they'd been able to reconnect and enjoy each other's company so effortlessly. His smile grew as he looked at her, unable to think of anything to say in return, just happy to be there with her. "You're quiet," she teased him with a soft laugh, meeting his gaze. Chris chuckled, still not quite finding the right words. "I just can't believe how well we click. You know," he said, pulling her close, "it's like everything just feels easy when I'm with you." They both fell into a comfortable silence, grateful for the closeness between them. Ashley leaned back, laughing softly, then stood up beside the bed to straighten her dress and glanced back at him with a playful grin. They exchanged a long look, both amused by how the night had turned into such a joyful time together. Ashley reached out, holding his hand again as they settled back down. "Tonight was just what I needed," she said, squeezing his hand. Chris leaned back against the pillows, relaxing with his hands behind his head, his expression full of warmth as he looked up at her. They stayed like that, each taking in the moment, each other's presence their only focus. It was a moment of simple happiness, a reminder of the bond they shared, and as they lay there in each other's company, both felt more at peace than they had in a long time. As they shared a quiet moment together, Ashley could sense Chris's calm confidence and warmth. She appreciated how he could take charge of a moment, yet still make her feel at ease. His familiar smile reflected his playful nature, and she felt a surge of affection, feeling understood in the way only Chris seemed to grasp. Without saying a word, Chris held her steady, and Ashley leaned in, grateful for his closeness and the comfort he brought. She felt her pulse quicken slightly as they moved together, lost in the simple, shared moment. Chris's reassuring look and confident, steady presence made her feel at home, grounding her emotions as they enjoyed each other's company. With a soft laugh, she whispered, "This is exactly where I want to be." And Chris looked at her warmly, nodding in agreement. It was the kind of quiet, genuine connection that made her feel safe, allowing her to let her guard down. Their laughter and smiles flowed easily, with both of them simply savoring the closeness they shared without any words needed. They exchanged a knowing look, and Ashley could feel her heart racing from the joy and simplicity of it all. She loved how Chris looked at her, making her feel special as though nothing else mattered. Chris looked intense, focused on Ashley with a surprising energy, and she felt a rush of excitement. Their playful banter had brought them to this point, filling the room with a sense of spontaneity and thrill. She was about to say something when they both turned their heads toward a faint noise. "Sorry, just coming down for some water," a voice said. Standing near the staircase was Clayton, looking a bit caught off guard but still smiling confidently. Chris and Ashley froze, surprised by his sudden presence. They exchanged quick glances, silently deciding what to do next. Aware of the awkwardness, but also feeling the laughter bubbling up from the unexpected situation. Clayton, sensing their surprise, waved his hand dismissively. "Don't mind me, just grabbing a drink," he said, turning and heading toward the kitchen. Ashley and Chris exchanged a look, both caught between laughter and disbelief. The situation was odd, no doubt, but they realized how funny and unexpected the whole thing was. Ashley chuckled, shaking her head, and Chris couldn't help but laugh as well. After a moment, the surprise faded and they found themselves relaxing again, appreciating the lightheartedness of the evening and the close bond they shared. It was a reminder of the trust and openness that allowed them to share even the silliest moments together, their relationship strengthened by each unique experience they encountered side by side. Ashley's hands rested on Chris's shoulders, and she closed her eyes, catching her breath as the energy between them built. Her breathing quickened, and she felt a deep rush of excitement, her heart racing. "Wow!" came a voice from the room, causing them both to jump. Chris turned quickly, surprised to see Clayton standing nearby. It took Chris a moment to understand, and he glanced at Ashley, who looked just as stunned. Clayton had stepped back slightly, his expression unreadable as he simply nodded toward them, then turned and made his way out, leaving Chris and Ashley in a quiet, awkward silence. Ashley met Chris's eyes, and they both began to laugh, breaking the tension. Chris could see a mix of surprise and humor in her expression as they tried to process what had just happened. They looked at each other, silently acknowledging how strange and unexpected the whole situation was, yet also realizing that they'd both found it oddly amusing. Chris leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief, while Ashley chuckled beside him, the warmth and trust between them even stronger in that shared, unexpected moment. As Chris and Ashley sat together, he gently brushed her shoulder, pulling her close. Their gazes met, and they shared a quiet understanding, feeling an unspoken closeness and warmth. Ashley let her eyes close briefly, grounding herself in the moment and the connection they were sharing. Chris held her close, his touch gentle and reassuring, providing a sense of comfort and trust. Ashley felt her heart race as she took in their closeness, cherishing the easy way they connected and the silent promises held in Chris's gaze. In that instant, they both understood the strength of their bond, one built on trust and the little moments they shared. Chris's hand rested on her shoulder, anchoring them both in the present. Clayton's earlier visit faded into the background as they focused solely on each other, sharing the kind of quiet, intimate moment that was only possible with someone who truly knew them. As they exchanged a final warm smile, the room felt lighter, filled with a simple sense of joy in each other's presence. They both knew that whatever life brought their way, they had each other to lean on, their silent connection a reminder of the trust and companionship that lay at the heart of their relationship. Ashley was taken aback, trying to process everything unfolding around her. Her heart raced as she focused on Chris, grounding herself in the moment with him. Clayton's unexpected presence added a layer of tension she hadn't anticipated, yet she kept her attention on Chris, fully present with him. Chris could feel the weight of the situation. He gently took Ashley's hand, their shared glance confirming a silent understanding between them, a reminder of the trust that formed the core of their relationship. He could sense her hesitation, the surreal nature of the moment shifting to something more grounded as they both held on to each other. Then Clayton took a step forward, edging closer to their shared space, but Chris looked up and firmly reminded him, "Stay back, Clayton. Let's keep some distance." Clayton took the hint, nodding and moving back respectfully, while Chris and Ashley maintained their connection, allowing a calm energy to settle between them. They exchanged another look, and slowly the tension ebbed, replaced by a sense of humor and relief at the unexpected situation. In the end, they shared a small laugh, both realizing how unusual yet oddly bonding the moment had been. Chris squeezed her hand, grateful for their shared trust and the sense of closeness that remained as they enjoyed each other's presence in their own quiet way. Ashley felt the tension build as she focused on her connection with Chris, her eyes determinedly meeting his. The intensity of the moment brought a quiet, mutual understanding between them, and she kept her gaze steady, centering on the closeness they shared. She leaned in, grounding herself fully in the comfort of being together. Chris, still feeling the surreal nature of the situation, gave her a reassuring smile, squeezing her hand to let her know he was there, that they were in this together. He could sense Ashley's mixed emotions and offered her a steady presence, helping her focus and letting her know he understood her thoughts without a word spoken. Clayton's presence had added a strange tension to the evening, but now, as they looked at each other, both Ashley and Chris could feel it dissipate. They took a moment to breathe, to ground themselves in the shared quiet, knowing they would talk about everything openly later. Right now, what mattered was the simple comfort and trust they had in each other, anchoring them in a world of their own. Finally, they both let out a quiet laugh, easing the last bit of tension, knowing that they'd navigate any surprises together side by side. This was the wildest thing the couple had ever done together, and they were both worried about how the other would feel. Chris noticed the guilt on Ashley's face. She needed some comfort after everything that had just happened. "I love you, Ashley. More than anything." Ashley gave a small smile, still a bit shaken by what had happened. "I love you too. I can't believe that just happened. It was unexpected." She looked at him, seeking reassurance. "It's okay, really," he replied, trying to calm her. "Let's clean up and we can talk about it." Ashley glanced down and exclaimed, "Oh no, I have a mess to clean up." "We'll get it sorted. You look amazing right now," he said gently. Ashley smiled back. "I love you so much, Chris." In that moment, they both remembered there was someone else in the room. When they turned to speak to Clayton, he had already left, the sound of a door closing upstairs letting them know he was back in his room to give them some privacy. Ashley cuddled into Chris's arm as they settled into their seats on the big plane to Vegas. Neither of them had ever flown first class before, and they were both amazed when Clayton gave them the tickets. They had only flown once before, on their honeymoon in Miami. Ashley's father had surprised them with that trip the night of their wedding. Both families had limited means, and she knew he must have worked hard to afford such a special gift. Clayton had also arranged for them to stay in a nice hotel suite on the Vegas Strip, saying it was important for them to look the part of a successful company. Chris felt it was too much, but Clayton brushed off his concerns. Chris promised to bring home some good business deals from the convention as a way to show his appreciation, but Clayton insisted that both Chris and Ashley were becoming important members of the team, and he believed in Chris's abilities. Chris found it odd that Clayton mentioned Ashley in this way, but things seemed to be moving too quickly to ask questions. "Hey, what are you thinking about?" Ashley asked, bringing Chris back to the moment as she handed him a glass of sparkling juice. He noticed the spark in her eyes. She seemed made for this lifestyle. "I was just thinking about how grateful I am to be on this trip with you and how much our lives have changed so quickly." "Cheers to that," she said, clinking her glass with his. It had been just over a week since their time at Clayton's house. Ashley had wanted to talk to Chris about recent changes in their relationship, but his busy schedule made it hard to find the right moment. She hoped to make sure they were both on the same page and that he had no unspoken concerns. Although he seemed content and their time together was as enjoyable as ever, she wanted to address anything that might be left unsaid before it caused any misunderstandings. As she sipped her champagne, she decided she'd bring it up once they checked into their hotel. As the plane lifted off, Ashley looked out at the city lights fading below. She finished her drink and leaned back, allowing the hum of the plane to lull her into a peaceful sleep. In her dreams, she found herself in their spacious Las Vegas hotel suite, surrounded by the glitter of the city. The room was grand, much larger than she'd expected, with soft lighting casting a warm glow. She noticed her reflection in a nearby mirror wearing a familiar black dress from the week before, its sleek lines accentuating her figure. A knock at the door broke her thoughts, and she opened it to see Clayton standing there, looking sharp in a well-tailored suit that added to his confident charm. He stepped into the room with a casual smile, closing the door behind him. "Hello, Ashley," he greeted, his tone light. "Don't mind me, I'm just here to observe." She looked at him, puzzled, wondering what he meant. As Clayton took another step forward, Ashley felt a mix of curiosity and surprise. His calm demeanor unsettled her, and she struggled to find words but found herself unable to speak. She felt trapped in the dream, watching as the room around her grew hazy. Then, from somewhere distant, she heard her name being called, a familiar voice pulling her back to reality. She turned, catching sight of Chris standing nearby, watching her with an expression of surprise. She reached out to him, wanting to explain, but the dream dissolved as his voice grew clearer. With a start, Ashley awoke in her seat on the plane, Chris's hand gently resting on hers. She took a deep breath, relieved to find herself back in the present, reminded of the conversation she wanted to have with him once they arrived. He reached out to gently touch her face, but before he could, Clayton pulled her closer, holding her firmly. "I told you she could do a lot more with those lips," Clayton said as he moved in closer. Ashley's heart raced as she struggled to come to terms with what was happening. She wanted to tell Chris that she cared for him and him alone, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she felt herself losing control and being drawn in deeper. Tears started to fill her eyes, but she was determined to keep going. Something inside her wanted to show that she could handle this situation. As she tried to manage everything around her, she noticed Chris stepping back, resigned, as he started to distract himself. Clayton laughed at Chris, and Ashley felt a mix of emotions as Clayton's hands moved around her. Without warning, Clayton picked Ashley up, and she let out a soft sound of surprise as he carried her to the bedroom. She caught Chris's eye one last time as he looked upset. His expression seemed to plead with her not to leave, but before she could respond, the door closed. They entered a fancy bedroom with soft sheets and dim lights. Clayton's hands were everywhere, exploring her. Ashley felt herself responding as her clothes were quickly set aside, almost forgetting about Chris. Just as Clayton positioned himself closer, Ashley was jolted awake by the captain announcing their descent into Las Vegas. She blinked, feeling confused for a moment, then realized where she was. Her face felt warm, and her heart raced as she tried to calm herself down. Glancing at Chris, who was still sleeping beside her, she felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She knew she needed to talk to Chris soon. Clayton took a deep breath and exhaled slowly while sitting at his computer, watching the blinking cursor. This week was vital for his company, and he needed to focus. The deal with the Morgan Group was set to close today. Another company was about to sign, and Katie was managing an account that could add more licenses. If they pulled it off, they could see their first profitable quarter since he started the business. But even with all this pressure, his mind kept drifting back to that night at his house. Ashley looked beautiful. Her dress highlighted all her best features. Throughout the night, it felt like she was playfully engaging with him and not shying away from his attention. Then he came down the stairs and saw them together. For a moment, he thought she might yell at him or try to hide herself. Instead, she looked at him in a way that surprised him. He could see the desire in her expression as her gaze moved down his body. If he didn't know better, he would have thought she might have welcomed him then and there, if Chris hadn't stepped in. Still, even with Chris setting boundaries, things continued to unfold. He watched as Clayton acted confidently in front of his wife. He encouraged her when she spoke, even telling her how lovely she looked in that moment. Maybe there was more to the situation than Clayton realized. He always saw Chris as a bit lenient, but could it be that he would really let Clayton get so close to his wife? What would Chris have done if Clayton had crossed the line? He pushed those thoughts away as he walked out of his office and into the main room. Everyone was focused on their work and barely looked up from their screens. Clayton surveyed the scene, feeling proud of what he had created. If it weren't for me, most of these people would probably be out of work, he thought, as he called for a quick team meeting in the conference room to talk about strategy. As the team entered the conference room, Clayton looked them over one by one. Most were young, fairly skilled sales representatives who had come from a larger company in junior roles. Here, they had to learn to thrive on their own without much guidance. He knew they needed more drive to close deals, but he hoped to inspire some of them, while others would just need to bring leads to the finish line so he could step in and seal the deal. As the sales team settled into their chairs, he watched them closely, his jaw tense. Beneath his expensive suit and confident demeanor, doubts lingered. Memories of past business partners echoed in his mind, telling him he would never succeed without his father's support. His father had often criticized him for his spending habits and failing ventures. He tightened his fists, determined to prove them all wrong. Success, influence, respect, it would all be his. A cough from one of the team members pulled him back to the moment. "Sir, should we start?" Clayton stood up at the head of the table and flashed his best smile at the small group of employees. "All right, team," he began, his voice strong. "This week is crucial for us. The deal with the Morgan Group is set to finalize today, and we have a couple of other important clients about to sign. We need to be at our best. I don't want any deals to slip away. If you feel like things are going off track, call me in." "This isn't the time for competition," Clayton said. There were nods of agreement around the table as the team got ready to go over that week's plans. Everyone was chatting with their neighbors, smiling and encouraging each other. "First on our agenda," Clayton went on, "Chris is in Vegas this week for the sales convention. I hope he's finding new opportunities for us. That means you should focus on closing the deals you already have instead of looking for new ones." The team felt a wave of determination as they discussed their plans for the week. Clayton listened closely, sharing his thoughts and guiding them when needed. He was clear that his approach would be the only one taken this week. No one should try to overshadow the others. As the meeting came to an end, Katie shyly raised her hand, her voice soft. Sir," she started, looking down. "My client, Creative Horizon, is having second thoughts. They think the price is too high. We have another call at the end of the week to talk it over." Clayton frowned slightly as he thought about this important deal. He could tell Katie was feeling stressed and knew she needed to handle this well. He turned to her with a reassuring look. Let's go over a plan this afternoon in my office. I'll be busy for a bit, but I should be available around 4:30. I need you to share everything that was said and how you plan to respond. I'll help you work through the details and secure the deal. It will be good practice for you." Clayton noticed Katie shift in her seat when he said that. He held her gaze until she looked back down, giving a small nod. With no more topics to cover, Clayton wrapped up the meeting, wishing everyone luck and telling them they could leave at 4 o'clock if their deals were good. As the team members began to leave, he noticed Katie looking a bit anxious, realizing she would be alone with him during the call. Once back in his office, Clayton got to work. He wanted to focus on the next features for BitGuardian, feeling that coding would help calm his nerves while the sales team worked on their tasks. The first few hours went smoothly, and he made good progress on his coding. But as the day went on, he found himself checking his email more frequently, hoping for signed documents. He resisted the urge to go out and give orders to the sales team, knowing it wouldn't help. While many of the deals were not yet finished, they seemed almost certain at this point. On top of that, whenever he wasn't focused on the sales team, he found himself thinking about how Ashley had been drawn to him last week. He had a feeling that once she got to know him better, she would be interested. He had not met anyone yet who wasn't at least a little curious about him. What he found most interesting was how easily she seemed to be captivated by him. He knew he still had a long way to go to win her heart completely, but he was trying to figure out how much of a challenge Chris might be in this situation. Was it what you expected? That was what Chris had said when she mentioned Clayton's confidence. This suggested she had already thought about it, probably after that night at the bar, and that they had talked openly about it. As Clayton thought through the situation, he received the news that the first signed contract had come through. He couldn't help but smile at his success. To test his luck further, he accessed his BitGuardian account and opened a hidden feature. With just a few clicks, he managed to link to Chris's phone and gain access to everything on it. He could also set it up as a listening device. As they checked into their room at the Aria, Ashley felt amazed. The energy of the city was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The hotel itself was stunning. The front of the building reflected the bright lights of the Strip, creating a beautiful view that almost overwhelmed her senses. Above, glowing glass hung like branches from a tree, giving off a warm light. In the background, she could hear the sounds of the slots and roulette, which made her heart race as they checked in at the front desk. Ashley was thrilled to be in Vegas. Being there made her feel alive. The worries she had earlier seemed to vanish among the city's excitement. She knew she still needed to speak with Chris about what happened last week, but now it felt less stressful and more inviting. While Chris handled the check-in, she wandered around the reception area, admiring a large indoor fountain. She watched in wonder as water danced in various patterns, and she felt mesmerized by the sight. While she observed, thoughts of her future with Chris crossed her mind. They had once discussed having children, but always put it off due to money concerns. Now it seemed like they were living their dream, with more opportunities than they had ever imagined. Could she finally find the courage to talk to Chris about the idea of starting a family? "We're all set. Are you ready to head up to the room?" Chris asked her from behind, pulling her from her thoughts. She smiled warmly and quickly kissed him on the cheek as they walked to the elevators. When they arrived at their room, it was even more amazing than they had expected. Clayton had mentioned booking a suite, so they thought it would be a small room with a nice view. Instead, they found what looked like a small apartment. When the door opened, the blinds moved to let in light from the city. The sitting area was as big as their living room back home, and the large bedroom even had a jacuzzi. The couple stood at the door, mouths open in surprise. They couldn't believe this was where they would be staying for the week. It felt like a dream they never wanted to leave. Chris flopped back onto the bed, sinking into the soft mattress. "I still have a few hours before my first meeting. Want to explore the city a bit and grab a bite to eat?" Ashley walked away from the window, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She turned to Chris, who was gazing up at the ceiling. "I'd love that, but first we should chat," she said playfully as she adjusted her shirt. Chris was still lost in thought about the upcoming conference and how to win business for his new company. "Sure, what do we need to talk about?" Chris asked, noticing something drop onto his face. He looked at Ashley, his brow raised in curiosity. "Last week," she said softly, standing in front of him, looking serious but playful. Clayton jumped up in his seat, feeling lucky. He quickly hit record on his computer and locked the door. He remembered that night and wanted to see it again. He tried to connect to Chris's camera, hoping to get the whole view, but when he checked his phone, it was still in his pocket, and all he saw was darkness. "What about it?" Chris asked, swallowing hard, trying to understand what was happening. Last week had been wild for him, even more than usual. He was still figuring out how to feel about it, especially after what happened with Clayton. At first, he thought it would bother him, but it actually lingered on his mind ever since that night. Ashley smiled and knelt in front of her husband, wanting to talk about it before they got caught up in the excitement of Vegas. She thought she knew everything about him, but these past weeks showed her that he had kept some things to himself. Ashley had been thinking a lot about recent events, feeling it was time for an open conversation with Chris. She wanted to be sure they were both comfortable and clear about their feelings, especially after everything they had experienced. She remembered Mrs. Johnson's advice about openness in relationships and wondered if Chris had any thoughts he hadn't shared yet. Despite her nervousness, Ashley knew this talk was necessary for their relationship. As she looked at Chris, she noticed a distant look in his eyes as he thought back on the events of last week. Taking a deep breath, she decided to gently bring up the topic. "I just want us to be honest about this, about how it made us feel. When we talked about things like this before, it was all just an idea, something between us, but last week—" She trailed off, gauging his reaction. Chris's face softened as he listened, his understanding and trust evident. They shared a moment of mutual respect, both realizing how much they valued the honesty they had built together. Neither noticed Chris's phone, which had slipped out of his pocket onto the floor, showing a small green indicator light on the screen. Meanwhile, miles away, Clayton sat at his desk, listening intently through a device he had somehow connected to Chris's phone. The audio was surprisingly clear, making him feel as if he were in the room. Clayton watched the screen, catching glimpses of the ceiling and edges of the bed, but unable to see the full scene. Despite his frustration with the limited view, he listened with a growing sense of intrigue, waiting to hear more. Back in their room, Ashley held Chris's hand, looking him in the eyes. "It's important that we're open with each other about our thoughts," she said softly, her tone reassuring. Chris nodded, reaching to hold her face gently. He knew she was right. If they didn't address their feelings openly, misunderstandings could grow. He took a breath, gathering his words, and admitted, "I wasn't expecting any of it. If we had been clear-headed, it probably wouldn't have happened. But once it did, seeing how you responded, it brought up feelings I hadn't anticipated." Ashley gave him a gentle smile, sensing his hesitation. She wanted him to know she understood and valued his openness. She leaned in, letting him feel her support as they both absorbed the depth of their conversation, feeling closer than ever in their honesty. Chris couldn't believe how openly Ashley was speaking. He felt amazed, seeing this confident side of her that he hadn't known before. "Once I saw how you responded," Chris began, his words halting as he searched for the right way to explain. "It was like watching something incredibly exciting, but more than just what I saw, it was the feeling, the energy, everything about it." Ashley, taken aback by Chris's openness, nodded, appreciating his honesty. She reached for his hand, both of them taking a moment to process everything. She hesitated, then quietly asked, "So, where do you see this fantasy going? Do you want to explore it further?" She looked at him, wanting to understand his thoughts, but also unsure of her own comfort level. Chris gently squeezed her hand, thinking carefully. "No, it's not about taking it that far. The idea is intriguing, but I don't want to cross any boundaries. I meant it when I said that there are lines we shouldn't cross. The trust we have matters too much to me." Ashley gave a relieved smile, feeling comforted by his response. She had felt the importance of setting clear boundaries and was grateful Chris felt the same way. "No touching then. That sounds good," she replied, pausing thoughtfully. "But does that mean you'd want to see something like that again? In a safe way?" Chris met her gaze, considering her question. "What about you?" he asked gently. "How did it feel to be the center of attention? Did you feel empowered by it?" He watched her expression, hoping to understand her thoughts. Ashley looked down, her face thoughtful. Honestly, there was something thrilling about it, but it also made me realize how much trust we have. Knowing we're on the same page is what made it all possible, she admitted with a smile, grateful for the open communication. Back in his office, Clayton listened intently, absorbing every word of their conversation. He sat back, thoughtful, realizing that Chris's words hinted at a curiosity he hadn't fully explored yet. Clayton's mind raced as he considered how he might subtly push things further, convinced he could help lead the couple toward even more openness one step at a time. Chris could sense there was more Ashley wanted to say. They'd been open about their thoughts lately, pushing boundaries in conversation that were new for both of them. Ashley hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I'll admit," she began, "when we first talked about this idea, I didn't think I'd be open to it. I thought it was just something for you." She paused, smiling as she looked into his eyes. "But that night, realizing someone was watching it was surprising. It felt strangely exciting, like it added this whole new level of energy. I never thought of myself that way, but I can see why people might be drawn to that kind of thrill." She laughed, feeling the tension ease between them, thankful they could share such thoughts openly. She took a steadying breath, realizing just how much she valued this closeness and honesty with Chris. Her feelings for him deepened with each shared experience and open moment. Chris grinned back, sensing her genuine enthusiasm and relief. "You felt powerful, didn't you?" he asked gently, his voice supportive. "Absolutely," she replied, a little surprised herself. "There was this rush I didn't expect." Her smile softened, and they exchanged a knowing look, both grateful for the openness they shared, which allowed them to explore these thoughts freely. She gave a playful grin, realizing there was one more thing to share. "I had a dream about him," she admitted softly, the hint of amusement clear in her voice. "Clayton?" Chris asked, his tone curious but light. He could see Ashley's sincerity, and her comfort with sharing made him feel closer to her. She nodded, laughing a bit as she described the dream, feeling the comfort of being fully understood. This honest moment left them both with a sense of clarity, grateful for the openness in their relationship, which allowed them to explore new ideas while strengthening their trust and connection. As they sat together, Ashley took a deep breath and finally began sharing a dream she'd had, hoping to be as open as possible with Chris. She watched him carefully, half expecting a look of surprise or even discomfort, but instead, she saw only interest and warmth. "I drifted off on the plane," she started, keeping her voice calm. "I dreamed we'd just checked into our room. You were in the bathroom, and when I opened the door, he was there." She paused, gauging Chris's reaction before continuing. "It was vivid, and I felt like I was caught in a strange moment. I knew it was just a dream, but it felt so real." She looked at Chris, hoping her honesty was clear. Chris's expression remained understanding as she continued. "In the dream, you stepped out of the bathroom at one point, but you didn't intervene. You were just there." Ashley's words trailed off as she thought back on the unusual intensity of the dream, feeling her heart race as she recounted it. She gave a small smile, realizing how strange and surprising it had been. Chris, still listening closely, felt a swirl of emotions but kept his focus on her. Her openness encouraged him to do the same, and he gave her hand a gentle squeeze, letting her know that he was there, that he understood her need to talk through this. Ashley finished, her words filling the space with a mix of surprise and relief. She looked at Chris, grateful for his patience and support. In that moment, both felt closer than ever, understanding that their connection rested on honesty and trust, strengthened by each open conversation they shared. Ashley steadied herself, feeling a bit dazed as she tried to bring her focus back to reality. She glanced down at Chris with a small, amused smile, letting him know she'd enjoyed their shared moment. "And that's when I woke up," she murmured, choosing to leave the story unfinished as she turned to head toward the shower, looking forward to clearing her thoughts. Meanwhile, in his office, Clayton leaned back, pleased with himself as he listened to the couple's conversation through the device he'd managed to tap into. Hearing their exchange gave him a thrill he hadn't anticipated, fueling his thoughts with plans and ideas. He convinced himself that he'd eventually find a way to work his way further into their lives. For now, he closed his laptop, his mind already racing with his next move. Precisely at 4:30, a soft knock came at Clayton's office door. "It's open," he called out, quickly switching back to his email just as his assistant Katie entered. Her gaze lowered shyly as she stepped in. "You asked to see me, sir?" she said quietly. "Good. Have a seat," he replied, gesturing for her to come in and close the door. Rising from his chair, he stretched before addressing her. "Now, give me an update." Katie took a breath, recounting the latest on her project. "Well, as I mentioned in the meeting, I thought the deal was nearly finalized. But at the last minute, they came back asking for an additional 20% discount to proceed." She fumbled slightly, feeling a surge of nerves as Clayton came to stand directly behind her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "Go on," he said in a low, commanding tone, and Katie felt herself tense under his presence. They said that without it, they'd have to reconsider." She continued, trying to steady her voice. "I've been doing my best, but some of these clients are just difficult to handle." Clayton sighed, sounding somewhat impatient. "It's not the product, it's confidence and assertiveness," he said sharply. "If you let discomfort hold you back, you'll find yourself missing out on opportunity. Take this as a lesson. You'll need to return to my office each day at this time, and we'll work on strengthening your approach. By the time I'm done with you, you'll be able to sell ice to anyone." Katie gasped. She wasn't sure what to say, so she just nodded. "Stop nodding. When someone talks to you, you look them in the eye and respond." Katie bit her lip. She knew this felt wrong, but somewhere inside, she wondered if allowing him to challenge her would actually make her a better salesperson. Gathering her courage, she lifted her head and met his gaze. "Yes, sir." He held her stare longer than she expected before a smile slowly appeared on his face. "Better. You're already improving." "Now stand up," he instructed, but he didn't step back. The training session started to take shape. As the minutes passed, the session became more intense. Clayton moved close to Katie, circling her as he pushed her to practice sales pitches. He would adjust her posture, pressing her shoulders back, or gently hold her chin to help her with her speech. This became their routine every day. "Speak clearly, with confidence. Don't let me intimidate you," he said, his face very close to hers. Katie tried not to shrink away from his intense gaze. After each long segment, he made sure to compliment her progress, no matter how minor. "I'm starting to see a spark in your eyes." "Good. We're making progress." His compliments felt like both praise and a warning not to falter. Feeling increasingly dependent on his approval while also afraid of his sharp remarks, Katie became lost in the process. At first, his closeness made her feel uneasy. Now, each interaction was thrilling. She spent her evenings practicing the lessons in her apartment, becoming fixated on impressing the man who had chosen her for this special training. Almost overnight, Katie had transformed, drawn to this challenge like a moth to a light. Chris adjusted his tie, feeling the pressure of the convention. He took a deep breath, ready to put his best foot forward for BitGuardian. He knew a lot depended on this event, and he was determined to show Clayton he was the right man for the job, to prove to everyone who had doubted him that he belonged here. The large venue was full of tech booths and professionals in suits shaking hands and swapping business cards. An hour later, Chris was briefly caught off guard when his phone buzzed in his pocket. Ashley sent a text with just 2 words and a photo attached. "Miss me?" He felt a rush of feelings when he saw her picture. It was a typical move for Ashley, a playful photo of her by the pool, with a suggestive smile. He knew her messages would only become more teasing from here. He tucked his phone away and focused on the IT manager he was speaking to. "Sorry about that. As I was saying, our multi-factor authentication process is very secure, so there's no risk of..." His words faded as his phone buzzed again. This time it was a video message titled, "For Your Eyes Only." Chris cleared his throat, trying to mask his distraction. "Excuse me for a moment." He stepped aside to a quiet area, his hands a little shaky as he opened the video. At first it seemed innocent enough, just Ashley relaxing by the pool. Then she blew a kiss to the camera, and the camera moved slowly. For a brief moment, it looked like she wasn't wearing much at all, but a hint of coverage appeared just in time. Chris's heart raced as he wondered how far this playful game would go. He needed to concentrate. Unfortunately, when he looked away from his phone, the IT manager was already moving on, clearly frustrated by his lack of focus. He moved on to the next group while his phone kept buzzing with photos and videos from Ashley. During breaks, he snuck a peek at her latest message. She must have left the pool for shopping, as the latest photo showed her in front of a mirror wearing minimal clothing, along with the text, "Trying on some new outfits for you." Chris aimed to stay focused as he approached the booth for Larkin Industries, a manufacturing company with around 2,000 employees in the Southwest. This was just the type of business he wanted to impress. "Tom Ashford, head of IT," the older man in a Navy suit said, shaking hands firmly. "What can you tell me about this BitGuardian?" Chris began his presentation, putting on his best smile. "Our mobile device management software will change how you manage security and data protection on your employees' phones and tablets. BitGuardian's top-level security measures." As he spoke, his phone vibrated in his pocket again. It was likely another teasing note from Ashley. He firmly ignored it and stayed focused on Tom. "Our integration can connect and protect every device linked to your company network. Experts predict mobile cyber attacks will increase significantly next year, so securing everything is vital." Tom thought for a moment, stroking his chin. "That all sounds pretty impressive. I must say, mobile security has been a real issue for us lately." Chris's phone buzzed again, this time in a way that told him it was probably a video. He struggled to keep his mind from wandering to what kind of video Ashley might have sent him. "And with our continuous monitoring systems, we'll keep threats away all day and night," he continued, trying to finish the conversation before he got distracted. "Let me know if you'd like me to prepare a formal proposal. I'd be happy to put something together." Chris took a breath as he saw Tom thinking about the proposal. "That sounds great. Here's my card. Contact me when you get back to the office and let's discuss a trial," Tom said, handing him his business card as he started to walk away. Feeling excited, Chris quickly pulled out his phone to tell Ashley, forgetting all about the videos and pictures being shared. When he unlocked his screen, he was surprised. "Room service is taking forever." Ashley had written over a picture of herself standing in a towel by the hotel room door. "Oh, wow," Chris heard from behind him. He turned around quickly, embarrassed to see Tom looking at his screen. Before Chris could say anything, Tom just smiled and said, "We will definitely stay in touch," before giving him a friendly pat on the shoulder and walking into the crowd. As the week went on, Clayton's actions changed and became more noticeable. He stood too close to Katie during their sessions, his body almost brushing against hers as he moved around her. He would touch her shoulders from behind and adjust her posture by putting a firm hand on her lower back. At first, Katie felt uncomfortable with these intrusions, but Clayton was skilled at slowly pushing boundaries. He had been in this situation many times and knew exactly how to behave. "Relax, I'm just showing you how to be confident," he whispered near her ear while adjusting her stance. "You're too reserved. A strong woman owns every room she enters." Gradually, Katie's walls started to come down. The more assertive Clayton became, the more it seemed to reinforce his advice on how to be confident. Was this what true confidence looked like, brushing off unsettling behavior? Part of her wanted to think he was just different in his methods, and despite her reservations, she began to feel more confident after his hands-on guidance. It was as if his boldness was slowly rubbing off on her. Clayton noticed the way she started to look at him. Katie entered Clayton's office for her final session of training that week, feeling a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. She had worked hard, and Clayton, though intense, had challenged her to improve. Standing before him, Katie smiled. "Thank you for everything, sir. I honestly feel like a new person." Clayton returned her smile, nodding with satisfaction. "You've come a long way," he replied. Katie gave him a warm, appreciative hug, feeling a sense of accomplishment and readiness for the next steps in her role. She stepped back, feeling both inspired and slightly overwhelmed. Clayton observed her, understanding that he'd played a part in helping her find her confidence, but knowing this was only the beginning. Katie had shown resilience all week, and Clayton was almost surprised at her composure. Still, he sensed her gradual openness to his guidance. As she sat down on the plush sofa, he joined her, sitting beside her with a calm and steady presence, continuing to guide her focus on building confidence. He leaned in closer, maintaining a respectful distance, yet sensing her receptiveness as they talked. His tone remained steady, and he offered her guidance in calm, reassuring words, his hands lightly gesturing to emphasize his points about confidence and patience. He observed Katie's reactions with a careful eye, recognizing her as someone who had come far under his mentorship. Patience is just as important as confidence, he noted, encouraging her to take her time in every task ahead. He wanted her to recognize her own progress and hold on to the assertiveness she'd begun to develop. Katie listened closely, feeling the weight of his words and the significance of the trust he'd shown in her abilities. She knew this was a turning point in her career, and she appreciated how Clayton had pushed her beyond her comfort zone to discover her strengths. This newfound confidence filled her with pride, realizing that she had gained not only skills, but a greater belief in herself. Katie felt the intensity of the moment, her breathing heavy as she sensed Clayton's commanding presence. She was overwhelmed by the new confidence she'd gained, recognizing how he had pushed her beyond her limits, both in her role and in embracing her assertiveness. Clayton watched her reactions, proud of how she had transformed under his mentorship. With a steady hand, he helped her to her feet and led her back to the sofa, guiding her to sit while he took a seat across from her. They exchanged a glance filled with a newfound mutual respect. Clayton's guidance had shown her the importance of patience, confidence, and standing her ground, and she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. "Remember," he said, his voice calm, "the strength you've built here goes with you everywhere." He emphasized that her assertiveness would carry her through any situation, whether in negotiations, meetings, or any other challenging moment. Katie nodded, grateful for the clarity and strength she'd gained. Their session complete, she thanked him and prepared to leave, feeling more self-assured and capable than ever before. As she walked out of his office, Katie knew she would carry this new strength forward, realizing she had gained far more than professional skills. She had unlocked her own self-confidence and resilience. Katie stood nervously, her gaze steady, trying to hide the uncertainty she felt. The room seemed to close in as Clayton moved closer, a quiet tension hanging between them. Clayton's intense look made her feel as if he could see right through her. As he gently pulled her closer, Katie felt the warmth of his embrace, both comforting and overwhelming. Despite the unfamiliarity, she couldn't ignore the comfort that his closeness brought. She tried to stay calm, matching his steady breathing, which soothed her nerves. There was an unspoken understanding between them, and Katie felt herself drawn into it. Clayton's hand found hers, their fingers entwining as they shared a quiet moment. His presence was reassuring, giving her the courage to let go of her hesitation. They moved in sync, a gentle rhythm forming as he guided her, each moment blending into the next. The tension softened into an easy familiarity, a feeling of closeness that seemed to dissolve any fear. The room around them faded away, leaving only the shared connection in its place. Katie's heart raced, a mix of excitement and warmth settling over her. She felt safe, as if finally at ease with the moment unfolding around them. The silence between them said more than words ever could, a mutual understanding forming in the quiet shared space. Katie found herself lost in the moment, a sense of overwhelming emotion and release flooding over her. Her surroundings seemed to fade as she gave in to a wave of pure joy, her laughter filling the room. She barely noticed the world around her, her mind entirely wrapped in this shared experience. It was an unforgettable, intense feeling that left her breathless and caught in the moment, her senses heightened. Clayton, sensing her happiness, pulled her close for a moment before stepping away, his focus shifting back to his work. Without looking at her, he gestured toward the bathroom. "There should be some towels in there if you need them," he said with a quick nod, already focused on the computer screen in front of him. Katie took a deep breath, steadying herself as she stood up. She glanced around, realizing her things were scattered across the room, and quickly gathered them, feeling a mix of emotions that she couldn't quite place. Deciding it was best to head straight home, she smoothed out her clothes, cast a last look at Clayton, now absorbed in his work, and slipped quietly out of the room without a word. Across the city, Chris and Ashley were enjoying their trip to Las Vegas, which had brought a new energy to their time together. The excitement of the trip, coupled with a lighthearted and playful attitude, had given them a fresh perspective. Ashley teased Chris about the attention she received at the convention, laughing as she jokingly asked why others couldn't share in the fun. The days turned into a blend of happy moments, laughter, and a rekindled connection that made their time in the city feel almost like a dream. Both enjoyed the change of scenery and the chance to rediscover a spark between them that felt stronger than ever. Sometimes, they imagined strangers watching them, while other times, Chris simply watched as a mystery admirer made Ashley feel good. But their exciting time in Vegas couldn't go on forever. When it eventually ended, they reluctantly said goodbye to the city, promising to come back someday. In the days that followed, Chris and Ashley found themselves in a constant state of attraction and desire. They enjoyed lingering looks and gentle touches whenever they could between their daily activities. Each moment together felt more daring than the last, as their renewed feelings kept them wanting more. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Vegas when Clayton called Chris into his office to talk about a promising deal with Larkin Industries. Chris had been in touch with Tom Ashford, Larkin's vice president, going over numbers and plans, hoping to get an agreement. But Tom seemed unsure. Chris couldn't tell if he didn't have the power to decide or if he was just delaying. Their conversations eventually turned to Ashley. Tom always asked about that beautiful wife, emphasizing the word beautiful in a way that reminded Chris of when Tom accidentally saw a playful photo of Ashley. Chris would reply with a simple, "She's great," trying to change the subject, but just those 2 words made his heart race. Strangely, he never told Ashley that Tom had seen that photo. He wasn't sure why. She probably wouldn't have minded and may have even used it in one of their playful scenarios. For some reason, Chris kept that secret to himself. "Listen, you've been working really hard on this Larkin deal, but I think we need a new approach." Clayton leaned back in his chair. "Why don't you fly out there and surprise them at their office? Show them we're serious." Chris snapped back to focus at Clayton's suggestion, sitting up straight on the comfy sofa. Chris frowned, unsure. "You don't think that's a bit too bold? We don't want to chase them away." "I think it will do the opposite," Clayton replied, putting his feet up on the desk. "It'll show them our commitment and that we're willing to do what it takes to keep them happy." Clayton's company was really growing, and getting the Larkin deal would prove himself, especially to his father. Running his fingers through his hair, Chris sighed. "Could you at least send Katie? She's been doing really well. Ashley can't take more time off work right now. She'll be upset if I leave again so soon after Vegas." A sly smile appeared on Clayton's face. It was true. The nightly practice sessions had helped Katie become a strong saleswoman. She had also learned to follow instructions well during their extra sessions. However, he wasn't ready to let her work alone, just yet he had bigger ideas. "Katie isn't the head of sales. You are," he replied. "What kind of impression would it give if we had you do all the work for weeks and then suddenly put Katie in at the most important time?" Chris knew his boss had a good point, but he felt nervous about leaving Ashley's side for too long. Things had been great between them recently, and he didn't want anything to disrupt that. Seeing Chris's unease, Clayton decided to make things more appealing. "All right, how about this? Let's add some excitement," he said, pausing with a playful smile. "How about a little wager if you're interested?" Those words made Chris's heart race. A new challenge he couldn't resist. "What do you have in mind?" he asked, curiosity clear in his voice. Clayton beamed, excitement in his eyes. "If you close this deal within 24 hours after arriving at Larkin's, you will earn a 10% stake in the company." He let the idea sink in, watching Chris carefully. 10%. Think about what that could mean. With the growth we are seeing and the money from the deal, it could change your life if you succeed. Chris was stunned as he grasped the importance of Clayton's offer. 10% ownership could change everything. He could finally give Ashley the life she wanted, free from money worries. She could leave her job, and they could start a family. After dreaming of this for so long, how could he say no? Before Clayton could mention any possible downsides, Chris was already nodding excitedly. "You have a deal." He jumped up from the sofa, feeling energized. "I'll pack my bags right now and tell Ashley." As Chris rushed out of the office, his mind raced with thoughts of the wealth he could gain, the wonderful things he could provide for Ashley, and the dreams they could finally achieve together. He just needed to nail this important pitch, and their lives would change forever. Ashley had just finished her last rounds and was heading into the hallway when her phone chimed with Chris's tune. A smile crossed her face as she stepped into the quiet space. "I was just thinking about you," she said warmly, leaning against the wall. "What's going on?" Chris took a deep breath before telling her. "Clayton wants me to go to Larkin Industries to try to close a deal. If I succeed, he's offering me a 10% ownership stake in the company." Ashley's eyes widened in surprise. "Babe, that's really big." She stopped, thinking about what it meant. "But another trip already? We just got back from Vegas. I can't take more time off work." I know. Chris's voice was steady and calm. "But think about what this could mean for us. 10% of BitGuardian? We're making progress. If the company does well like I hope, we could have financial freedom. Maybe you could cut back at the hospital or even stop working completely." He paused, emphasizing his point. "Starting a family like we've talked about?" Ashley's heart raced at that last thought. Having a baby together was something they had dreamt of but hadn't acted on. This could make that dream come true sooner than they expected. "Well, when you put it that way," Ashley replied, considering it, "but you owe me, a lot. Don't think you can just leave me hanging while you're away." Chris laughed at her spirited reply. "Would I ever do that to you? You know I'll keep you busy until I return." "Oh, really?" Ashley teased, her tone light. "And how do you plan on doing that from so far away?" "Well, I could start by sharing in detail what I want to do when I get back," Chris said, his tone warm. "How I'll make sure you feel special and cared for." Ashley took a quick breath. "You're teasing me. Maybe I'll wear something fun at work. What do you think the patients will say if they see their nurse dressed a little differently?" Now it was Chris's turn to pause. He imagined the outfit she meant, one that was quite daring. "If you did that, I bet you'd have a lot of attention. Guys would be interested in you." With a playful laugh, Ashley looked around the quiet hallway. "Maybe that's what I need. A strong man to take care of me while my husband's away." She tensed, suddenly aware of a sound, her cheeks warming at the thought of being overheard. In a softer voice, she continued, "Just being close, feeling someone's warmth beside me." As she spoke, she unknowingly closed her eyes and leaned back against the wall. When she opened them, she noticed the janitor stepping out of another room. His wide smile showed that he had heard more than she wanted. Ashley felt heat rise to her face, realizing he probably caught most of their chat. Quickly, she turned and hurried down the hall. "Are you still there, babe? I lost you for a minute." Her husband's voice rang in her ear as she realized she had been holding her breath. "Why don't I call you later when I'm not, at work?" she said quietly, still feeling embarrassed. "Everything okay?" Chris asked, concern in his voice. Yeah, everything's fine," Ashley said, although her cheeks were still warm. "Just busy at work. We'll chat more tonight. I love you." She quickly ended the call and looked nervously over her shoulder. The janitor was still there, observing her as she hurried around the corner. Less than 6 hours later, Chris tossed his bags into a town car and adjusted his tie, heading to Larkin headquarters. If all went well, by this time tomorrow, he would secure an important deal for the company and gain some shares as well. To calm his nerves, he sent Ashley a text to let her know he had arrived safely. "Hey babe, just landed. Sorry again for the short notice. I miss you already." Ashley replied almost right away. "I miss you too. This bath just isn't the same without you." She sent a picture that made Chris gasp. The image left little to the imagination, and he wished he could be there with her. "I hate being so far from you. I wish I could be in that tub with you, giving you attention," he typed, trying to hold back his longing. "My attention? That's all you're focused on?" Ashley teased, wanting to lighten the mood after her busy day. "Oh, that would just be the beginning. I can't stop thinking about you," he replied, glancing up to see if the driver was paying attention. "The way you move, how you react." Ashley felt a flutter of excitement as she thought about him. "Tell me more," she typed, feeling the moment. Just then, Chris's phone buzzed with Clayton's name flashing on the screen. "Oh no, it's Clayton," he quickly typed back. "I have to pause, sorry." Ashley sighed, reluctantly settling into the water as Chris answered the call. "Hey man, Hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. Just wanted to check in and see if you arrived okay. Clayton chuckled as he noticed the messages between Chris and Ashley on his computer. Not at all, Chris replied, trying to sound casual. Just sitting in the car now, heading to Larkin. I'm surprised they managed to gather the board so quickly. That means they're more interested than they let on. I told you going out there was a good idea. Now, let's go over the important points. I want to make sure everything goes smoothly. Chris took a deep breath, running his fingers through his hair, trying to stay focused despite his nerves. Sure thing, let me just get it pulled up. Chris adjusted his tie and took a deep breath as he entered Larkin Industries. Tom welcomed him at the front desk with a friendly smile and a firm handshake. Great to see you again, Chris. I hope the trip wasn't too tiring. Not at all, Tom. Happy to be here, Chris replied, returning the smile and shaking his hand firmly. Tom leaned in a little with a playful grin. I don't see your lovely wife with you. Couldn't get her to come along for this work trip? Chris felt a small flutter of discomfort, but kept his professional tone. Ashley had to stay back for work obligations, unfortunately. That's too bad, Tom said, suddenly shifting his focus. Well, let's get you in front of the board. He opened a large set of double doors. As Chris stepped into the room, he was surprised to find that he and Tom were the last to arrive. He had thought the board members would come in after him, allowing him a moment to collect his thoughts. Instead, he stood in front of the 7-board member panel, putting on his best smile and running his fingers through his hair to steady himself while Tom took his seat. Once the room quieted and Chris's presentation began, he dove into his pitch, showcasing BitGuardian's new security solutions and potential partnership benefits. The executives listened closely, jotting down notes and nodding in agreement at times. As the meeting continued, Chris noticed a positive change in the atmosphere. The executives seemed impressed, nodding along with his points. A feeling of hope sparked inside him, easing the doubts he had brought with him. The CEO leaned forward, looking thoughtful, which made Chris feel more confident, believing his ideas about BitGuardian were connecting with them. However, just as he began to feel optimistic about closing the deal, one of the executives raised a hand. I have a concern about your company's small size and short history, he said, leaning forward. Given the current privacy issues, these points raise concerns. Chris took a deep breath and tried to answer the worry, but he noticed the uncertainty returning to the executives' faces as he spoke. As the last slides changed on the screen, the same board member cleared his throat and turned to his colleagues. Well, I think it's clear Chris has made a strong case for why we should seriously consider this partnership, he said, pausing to meet Chris's eyes. However, considering the issues I mentioned earlier, I don't want to rush into any commitment today. Chris's heartbeat quickened as he continued. Let's take a day to carefully look over the materials together as a team and meet again to decide if we want to move forward with the purchase. We can come back here at the same time tomorrow for a final choice. The other board members nodded in agreement. A dozen doubts filled Chris's mind, pushing him to ask for an immediate decision, especially with the personal stakes involved and Clayton's challenge. Even though he wanted to end the day positively, he knew he had to face these worries to secure a deal. One board member suddenly looked uneasy and raised an eyebrow. Is that going to be a problem? He asked. If you need to leave now, we can... No, I can definitely be here tomorrow, Chris interrupted quickly, not wanting to risk the opportunity just to win. As enticing as owning a part of BitGuardian was, this chance was too important to jeopardize. Great. We'll be in touch, he said, sounding a bit too cold for Chris's comfort, as they all stood up and started to leave the meeting room. Chris let out a long breath, feeling a bit defeated. Great presentation, man, but I have to say you almost lost them at the end. What happened? Tom was back at Chris's side, offering a friendly smile. I know, it was a mistake. I was just tired and wanted to get home. I understand. If I had a surprise waiting for me. Tom laughed, giving Chris a friendly pat on the shoulder as they walked out of the office. While it wasn't the big win he had hoped for, he had still made significant progress toward landing an important client. Just another day of planning with the board, and then he would be back home with Ashley. An hour later, Chris sank onto his hotel bed feeling exhausted. As his eyes grew heavy, he sent another message to Ashley. Finally back in my room. The meeting wasn't a flop, but it seems like that equity stake might not work out as we hoped. Ah, I'm sorry, love. Maybe this will cheer you up. The next message that appeared was a playful picture of Ashley, looking beautiful. Chris smiled as he saw the message from Ashley. You always know how to lift my spirits. He could feel the tension from the long day start to ease away. He shifted on the bed and typed a reply. This bed feels so empty without my wonderful wife. On the other end, Ashley smiled as she read his message. Oh, really? She paused before typing back. And what would you do if I were there? Ashley texted Chris with a playful smile. Well, first... Chris typed, imagining the scene. I'd hold you close, take my time, making you feel special. I wouldn't make it easy for you, though, he added with a teasing tone. You tease. I miss you so much. Ashley replied, shifting on her bed as she waited for his next message, the anticipation making her smile. Believe me, when I get home, I'll make sure you know just how much I missed you, he wrote back. Ashley typed quickly, I really needed this. You're making my day, even from far away. That's the plan. You'll be on my mind until I get back, he responded, imagining their reunion. Just as he was about to write more, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. It's Clayton, he texted back to Ashley. Now? Can't he wait? She replied, a bit disappointed. I'd ignore it, but he's probably just following up about the big meeting. Don't worry, I'll make it up to you later, Chris texted before answering the call. Ashley sighed and set her phone down, her excitement fading. Guess I'll just head to bed, she thought, disappointed but understanding. Meanwhile, as Clayton spoke with Chris, he seemed focused on work but couldn't help but notice Ashley's picture Chris had shared earlier. Smiling to himself, he continued with his pitch, thinking about his plans and the meeting's success. The next morning, Ashley went about her rounds at the hospital, her thoughts still drifting to the conversation with Chris. She couldn't shake the anticipation, feeling eager for the evening when she could finally relax and reconnect with him. Every hour seemed to stretch on as she moved from patient to patient, caught between her dedication to her work and her thoughts of Chris. But for now, she focused on her patients, knowing her day would eventually lead to some much-needed time together. Her rounds led her to Mrs. Johnson, one of her favorite patients, and Ashley smiled as she entered the room. The comforting presence of the elderly woman always helped Ashley feel grounded. Chatting with Mrs. Johnson, she felt lighter, forgetting her own feelings for a moment. Despite her reservations about the new, bold side of her and Chris's relationship, she couldn't deny the thrill of their connection. Ashley no longer felt any guilt about light-hearted, friendly conversations with others. She knew that as long as she shared everything with Chris, it only made their connection stronger. As she turned a corner in the hospital, Ashley's steps slowed. Mrs. Johnson's room was empty, the bed neatly made, and a janitor mopped the floor nearby. A hint of sadness filled her, but she approached the janitor anyway. "Hi there," she said warmly. "Do you know if Mrs. Johnson will be coming back?" The janitor looked up, his gaze briefly settling on her. "She was discharged this morning," he replied with a shrug. "But she's a regular. Probably see her again soon." Ashley thanked him and reached for a supply bag on a high shelf, standing on her tiptoes. Suddenly aware of the janitor's presence nearby, she felt a bit self-conscious. He stepped closer, offering, "Need a hand with that?" She turned to politely decline, but he was already beside her. The unexpected closeness made her realize how tense she felt, her thoughts still drifting to Chris and their earlier conversation. At that moment, her pager beeped, snapping her back to reality. "I need to take this," she said quickly, grabbing the supply bag and making her way down the hall. In the quiet of the staff room, Ashley caught her breath, sending Chris a quick message. "Just ran into the janitor at work, and I couldn't help but think of you," she wrote, smiling to herself, adding, "Wish you were here. This is all your fault for making me so worked up." The response came quickly, short but full of promise. "Oh, I'm eager to hear it. I'm going to surprise you when I get home. Or should I say, the janitor is going to surprise you?" Ashley shuddered softly at the words, excitement rushing through her. She felt a strong urge for Chris to be with her again. Chris smiled as he read the message from his wife. He felt a rush of energy as his car drove back to Larkin Industries. He was amazed that his sweet wife was acting this way. Even more surprising was how it affected him. He never thought of himself in that light, but he couldn't ignore the changes he felt. He knew he had to keep things balanced. Trust and good communication were what they agreed on during their trip. Taking a deep breath, Chris felt a little disappointed as the car stopped in front of the big building. Even though he didn't close the deal yesterday, he needed to give his best today. If he couldn't gain equity, he at least wanted the glory of landing a major client. Inside the reception area, Tom greeted him again. Tom mentioned that his earlier talks with the board had gone well, giving Chris confidence that if he performed like yesterday, things would look good. With renewed hope, Chris entered the big conference room. He took the time to shake hands with each board member and thank them for their consideration. He then jumped right into his presentation, turning it into a live demo. He wanted them to see the tools they would have available and to reassure them that their privacy would be respected. As the demo continued, Chris felt a creeping doubt about whether they would sign. Just when he started to lose faith, one board member who had been challenging yesterday flashed him a grin. "I think we've seen enough. We've tested you these last few days, but we wanted to see how well your software and your company could handle pressure. I'm pleased to say you've met our expectations." Chris stood still for a moment, taking in what was said. As polite applause filled the room, Tom patted Chris on the shoulder. "Great job, my friend. I knew you could do it," he said, his hand resting a bit too long. "Next time you're in town, bring your wife along. I insist that you both join me for dinner to celebrate properly." Chris forced a thankful smile, but Tom's keen interest in Ashley made him uneasy. "Absolutely, Tom. We'd be happy to." As they shook hands, Chris wondered if he had opened a door he might soon regret. The drive back from Larkin's headquarters felt like it lasted forever for Chris. As the city's skyline disappeared in the rearview mirror, his mind raced, replaying every moment and wondering if he had read too much into Tom's comments about Ashley. After all, he wasn't the first guy to admire Ashley's beauty. Was his imagination telling him there was more to it? When Chris returned to his hotel room, he allowed himself 10 minutes to celebrate. He let out a loud shout as he danced around, feeling like he had just won something big. He knew he would eventually close the deal, but the excitement of actually doing it made him feel great. Clayton might not give him a larger share just yet, but a few more deals like this would make it happen. He and Ashley could still start a family and live the life he dreamed of, even if it wasn't according to the exact plan he had just 24 hours ago. Once he tired himself out, he fell back on the bed feeling worn out, then called Clayton to share the news. "What do you have for me?" came Clayton's quick reply. "A signed agreement and a bunch of happy customers," Chris said, his excitement clear in his voice. "That's amazing. I knew you could do it. I have a couple of meetings this afternoon, but I want to look into the details of the company later. Can you send over your documents about the key players?" Chris held his breath for a moment, not expecting Clayton to want to jump in so quickly after signing. I don't have that with me. I left it all at home yesterday when I packed, but I can take a red-eye flight tonight and bring you the papers in the morning." There was a long pause on the other end of the line as Clayton took in what Chris said. "I need it tonight," Clayton stated firmly. "I want to have their welcome packet ready bright and early so we can impress them." He paused, sounding casual. "Call up Ashley and ask her to bring the files to the office." Clayton's laid-back suggestion caught Chris off guard. He didn't think about how Ashley might feel about it. Yeah, sure. I can ask her," he replied after a moment. "She should be getting off work soon. I'll let her know you're expecting her." Clayton's face lit up. That was even easier than he had expected. He thought Chris would hesitate, but instead, he was happily sending his wife to Clayton. "Sounds good. Great job again, my friend. I knew you could handle it." After a few more minutes of chatting, Chris hung up his phone, smiled at himself in the mirror, and then called Ashley to ask for a favor. "I did it, honey! They signed!" he said excitedly as soon as she picked up the phone. "That's wonderful! I'm so proud of you," Ashley replied warmly. "I knew you could do it. Now hurry home to me. I'm catching the late flight back tonight. I'll be home before morning. You better be ready for me," he said playfully, wishing he could just be there. "In that case, I should hop in the shower and get ready. Listen, there's one more thing I need from you. Clayton wants me to send him my full portfolio on the Larkin executives tonight so he can prepare the welcome packet for them in the morning. He's eager to start, but I left the folder at home. Could you drop it off at the office for him? Ashley hesitated when she heard this. Are you sure it's a good idea for me to go to Clayton's office alone after what happened last time? Chris cursed himself quietly. He hadn't thought about how this could make her uneasy. He was so caught up in the excitement that he forgot all about that night. Don't worry, he'll be at the office, so you won't be alone. Chris tried to sound confident, but felt he was failing. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, she replied, setting aside her worries. It'll just be a quick drop-off. No reason to make it a bigger deal than it is. Ashley forced a smile, not entirely convinced, but willing to push her doubts away for now. All right then, I'll stop by the office after I grab a quick bite and have a shower. Just send me a list of the files you need. Thanks, I really appreciate it. I promise as soon as I get home I'll... Don't say it. I don't want that on my mind while I'm there. Just tell me what files you need and I'll take care of it. But, yes, you owe me. She forced a small laugh, trying to brighten the mood. She knew how much this win meant to Chris. After talking with Chris, Ashley went home to get ready before heading to the office. She showered and changed into a casual summer dress, wanting to look nice yet feel comfortable. The cool evening air didn't help settle the mix of emotions inside Ashley as she arrived at the BitGuardian parking lot. Part of her still buzzed with memories of that afternoon's unexpected meeting with the janitor. She could still feel the warmth of his presence close to her. A shiver ran through her, blending excitement with a hint of fear. As she turned off the engine, Ashley looked at the dark office building and told herself to stay calm. She just needed to get in and out. Walking towards the front door, she saw Clayton by a side entrance, waving her over. "Ashley, over here," Clayton called with a friendly smile. "I thought it'd be better to avoid the main office. No need to deal with any rumors." Ashley raised an eyebrow, but walked towards him. "Rumors about what?" "You know how things get mixed up," Clayton replied lightly. "I wouldn't want anyone to misunderstand why you're here after hours." She nodded, reminding herself to stay open-minded. Clayton was right. It was smart to avoid any misunderstandings. "I didn't think about that." "Thanks," Ashley said, her expression softening. "I just needed to drop off these files." "Thanks, Ashley," Clayton said, taking the files from her but not letting her leave just yet. "Can you come inside for a minute? I need to make some copies." Reluctantly, she agreed and followed him into the office, feeling a tension in the air. Clayton set the files on a desk and turned to her, a glint of something in his eyes. "You know," he started, his voice low, "I've been thinking about that night when I saw you and Chris." Ashley straightened up, feeling her heartbeat quicken, but she stood her ground. "Let's not talk about that," she replied firmly. Clayton took a step closer, lowering his voice even more. "I get the feeling you still think about it, what you felt back then." She looked him straight in the eyes, determined. "I've dealt with people like you before, Clayton. If you think this is going to change my feelings for Chris, you're wrong. That night was special for us, not for you." His expression shifted between amusement and frustration as he moved even closer. "And what do you think of me?" "You're arrogant and only care about yourself," she said, feeling her anger rise. "I doubt you really know how to treat someone well." Clayton's face grew serious, tension building between them. He moved closer and raised his hand as if to say something, but their tense moment was broken by a soft knock on the office door. Ashley's eyes widened with worry about the office rumors Clayton had mentioned earlier. Clayton quickly put his finger to his lips, signaling her to keep quiet. "Get in the closet," he whispered urgently. She shot him a look of disapproval, but knew there was no time to argue. The knock came again, this time louder. Without saying anything else, she slipped into the nearby closet, shutting the door just as Clayton opened his office door to greet the surprise visitor. Katie stepped into the dimly lit office. Without a word, she walked over to Clayton, greeting him with a kiss. "Is this assertive enough for you?" she whispered, pressing him lightly against the wall. Clayton smiled at her and guided her toward the sofa where they sat together. Katie leaned in closer, speaking softly. "Everyone is gone for the day. I just locked the front door." As she moved, Clayton glanced at Ashley in the closet, a knowing smile on his face. Ashley felt uneasy. What was going on? She didn't want to be part of this situation. Clayton was pleased. He had both women right where he wanted them. As Katie continued her conversation, Clayton complimented her on her choice of outfit. She laughed, reminding him that she was the top seller in the company. He continued to engage with her, keeping a close eye on Ashley, who remained hidden. Ashley felt trapped, wondering how everything would resolve and hoping to stay out of it. Ashley felt a rush of emotions as she watched the scene unfold. There was an odd, intense energy in the room that left her rooted in place, unsure if she should step back or stay. Katie's laughter and joy filled the room as she and Clayton enjoyed each other's company, their shared closeness obvious. Clayton leaned closer, his movements tender and caring. Katie's contentment was clear as she relaxed, enjoying his gentle touch and the warmth of the moment. She wrapped her arms around him, and they shared a quiet connection, laughing softly as they spoke in low voices. As Ashley watched from her hidden spot, she felt a mixture of emotions. Part of her wanted to look away, but she couldn't ignore the curiosity stirring within her. She had never seen a moment so raw and genuine. It reminded her of scenes she might see in movies, only this was real, and she was part of it, though only as an observer. The intensity of the moment took her by surprise, and she found herself struggling with a confusing mix of curiosity and wonder. Clayton's eyes briefly met hers across the room just for an instant. That one glance was enough to make her feel unexpectedly seen, even from the shadows. She knew she should leave, but a part of her was drawn to the quiet vulnerability of the scene, wanting to understand what it meant. She took a slow, careful step back, watching as Katie continued to smile, her happiness radiating outward. Ashley's mind raced, unsure of what to make of this moment. Everything felt surreal, and she couldn't shake the feeling that somehow she had been meant to see this. Feeling the weight of her own thoughts, she turned and quietly slipped away, her heart still pounding, filled with questions she couldn't yet answer. Ashley found herself caught in a tense and confusing situation, her breathing quickening as she tried to make sense of what was unfolding. She stood just behind the closet door, peeking through a small crack, watching as Clayton directed his attention toward Katie, who seemed completely at ease and happy. He moved with purpose, clearly focused on making her feel comfortable and cared for. Clayton kept glancing toward the closet door, almost as if he sensed Ashley's presence. His movements were steady, and it was clear he wanted her to witness the closeness between him and Katie, as if inviting her to understand the moment on a deeper level. Katie's joy was obvious, her laughter filling the room as she moved in time with Clayton's gestures, entirely absorbed in the experience. Ashley's pulse raced as she took another careful step forward, feeling both curiosity and hesitation. She knew she should step away, but something kept her there, drawn to the unusual scene unfolding. The connection between Clayton and Katie was undeniable, and it left Ashley feeling both intrigued and uncertain. As she moved even closer, her face near the small opening in the door, she realized she was crossing a line, allowing herself to observe a moment that felt intimate and private. In that stillness, Ashley held her breath, her mind racing with questions she couldn't quite put into words. She stayed a moment longer, watching as Clayton and Katie shared a deep, unspoken understanding. The moment felt both surreal and grounding, as if she were seeing something honest and real that she couldn't look away from. Clayton couldn't see all of her, but what he could see was quite striking. She didn't realize that she was lightly touching herself, responding to the intense feelings inside her. It was all so captivating. Clayton took a moment away from Katie, looking into the open closet with a knowing smile. Ashley was getting more curious, forgetting her earlier caution. She had moved close enough to the lighted crack that he could see her face, slightly distorted and seemingly out of breath. Was she touching herself? She seemed even more excited than he expected. He refocused on Katie, knowing she would need more attention. He didn't want to scare Ashley, but he had a feeling she would give in to what she was seeing. He guessed that the closet door wouldn't stay shut for long, and would eventually crack open a bit more, offering a little display. Ashley was captivated by what she was watching and hearing. It wasn't just that she could see Katie, but she unknowingly started to picture herself in Katie's place. She couldn't focus on anything for long. She would look at the moaning Katie for a time, but her gaze kept drifting to Clayton, Her heart raced, and her fingers found their way to her own body. Clayton was right. The growing sensation inside her pulled at her like a magnet, encouraging her to explore. She let little be left to the imagination. She brought her hand down, slipping it under her loose dress. She felt a spark as her fingers brushed against her skin, and a quiet gasp escaped her lips. Her body moved in rhythm with her touch, showing a mix of emotions. Unknowingly, Ashley had nudged the door ever so slightly. The small movement opened up her view, making everything clearer for Clayton, who was thrilled by what he could see. Just when she thought she couldn't hold back any longer, all eyes were on Katie. Ashley watched as Katie lifted her head, turning side to side and calling out, asking him not to stop. Ashley found herself overwhelmed by the strange situation unfolding before her. Hidden just behind the door, she peered through the small opening, caught between her curiosity and the awareness that she was witnessing something deeply personal. As Katie's laughter filled the room, Ashley noticed Clayton's gaze drifting toward the closet door, almost as if he sensed her presence. She felt rooted to the spot, unable to look away, even as a mix of surprise and uncertainty grew within her. Her heart raced, each beat intensifying as she watched their shared moment of closeness, both simple and genuine. She couldn't ignore the pull she felt, unable to fully understand why she was drawn to this scene. Ashley struggled with conflicting thoughts. Part of her knew she should close the door, leave, and respect the privacy of the two people in front of her. But curiosity had her rooted in place, quietly observing the quiet warmth between them. The unexpected emotions left her unsure. Yet her attention remained fixed, wondering what this strange encounter meant and why it affected her so much. Suddenly, the sharp sound of a phone ringing pulled her back to reality, and she quickly closed the door, leaning against the wall as she tried to make sense of it all. She was filled with confusion, her mind racing as she replayed what she'd just seen, realizing how deeply she'd been drawn into the unexpected moment. Part of her felt strong and free, while another part felt lost in her own thoughts. "It's the Newton deal, 200-seat prospect," Katie said between breaths. Katie tried to get up, but Clayton pushed her back down. "Sorry," he whispered, shrugging as if it was all a misunderstanding. "She just stepped out to take that call. You can leave through the back." Ashley quickly grabbed her bag, still confused by what had just happened. As he guided her out the back door, he turned her to face him. For a second, she worried he might try to kiss her, and she wasn't sure if she could stop him. "Do you always react like that?" he asked with a smirk. Then he gently closed the door, leaving her feeling flustered in the parking lot. The drive home was a struggle for Ashley. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Images flashed through her mind, like Clayton's confident look and Katie's excited voice. She realized everything she thought about Clayton was wrong. He was not just someone who talked a big game. She squeezed her eyes shut, but it didn't help. The memories kept flooding back, including the janitor's solid body close to hers earlier. A chill ran through her as she recalled how much she had wanted to lean into him in that moment. This is all Clayton's fault, Ashley told herself, wanting to believe he was the reason for her confusion. But a small voice inside reminded her that she had played a part too. No matter how much she tried to blame him, she couldn't ignore her own feelings. Her grip on the wheel tightened as she faced this truth. Was she really becoming someone consumed by her own desires? A wave of panic washed over her at the thought. How would Chris react when she told him? Should she even share this with him? They had played around before, but this felt deeper, more intimate. A mix of emotions swirled within her: disappointment in herself, fear of becoming someone she didn't recognize, and a strange excitement. When she pulled into their driveway, she should have felt relief, but instead, Ashley felt lost and uncertain. As she turned off the engine, her determination wavered. Could she really keep all this from Chris and let it fester between them like a hidden sore? But the idea of revealing everything she felt made her feel just as scared. He wouldn't understand, she thought. He would be shocked by the person she had become. Shaking, Ashley sat quietly, surrounded by the familiar things in her simple life. She looked around their home, feeling as if she was in someone else's skin. As her intense feelings threatened to overwhelm her, tears began to fill Ashley's eyes. She had always felt good about her self-control and her understanding of right and wrong. But now, as her deep desires twisted inside her like a tight coil, Ashley understood she could no longer ignore the truth these feelings were hers alone, not influenced by anyone else. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car. However, as the weight of this realization settled on her, something else stirred inside her too. A strange sense of excitement grew as she recognized that many men wanted to be with her. Even though guilt lingered in her heart, she felt a dangerous thrill in acknowledging her own needs. With her head held high, Ashley walked into the house, no longer sure of who she truly was. The success of BitGuardian reached new heights after Chris's big deal with Larkin Industries. Many new clients began to come to the company, leading to rapid growth and excitement among the team. For Chris and Ashley, this brought big changes. No more worrying about which bills to pay or hold off on. Instead, they bought new kitchen appliances and furniture. Chris even treated himself to a brand new BMW, a big change from the old Honda he had been driving. They sat together on the soft patio sofa, sipping coffee and enjoying the warmth of the sun. Ashley rested her feet in Chris's lap as he playfully traced patterns on her legs, admiring their beautifully arranged backyard. A calm and happy feeling settled over Chris as he took in their little paradise. This was the life he had always wanted to give Ashley after all they had faced together. They could finally relax and enjoy the rewards of their hard work. He felt Ashley's foot nudge against his chest, pulling him from his thoughts. He glanced over to see her bright smile and sparkling eyes. Even in this moment of comfort, the spark of adventure and connection they shared still glowed strong between them. "You know," Ashley said, her voice gentle but filled with excitement, "I was thinking we should have a dinner party. It's been a while since we had everyone over." Chris nodded, a smile growing on his face. "That sounds great. We could show off the new kitchen soon, maybe next month. Don't forget, we have my company party this week. Clayton is excited to gather everyone to celebrate the company's recent success. All because of my efforts, of course." Chris gave a playful wink and showed a bit of pride. He was happy to have done well in leading his sales team. Ashley laughed softly and rolled her eyes at his playful attitude. Still, thinking about Clayton and the party made her heart race. She remembered the last time she saw him, locked in a closet during a memorable moment. It was a night filled with intense feelings and reminders of his charm, which left a lasting impression on her. His teasing words echoed in her mind, sticking with her since then. "Ashley, are you with us?" Chris asked, bringing her back to the moment. She realized she had been biting her lip, tasting a bit of blood. Ashley forced a smile, looking at Chris with a teasing glance. "I was just thinking about what to wear to the party. I have a feeling someone might want me to stand out." As she said this, she noticed Chris's expression change slightly with interest. She enjoyed teasing him and, despite feeling uncertain at first, was beginning to embrace this new side of their relationship. Yet a part of her felt guilty for not telling Chris everything about that night with Clayton. He thought it was just casual flirting, but she felt there was more to the story and found it hard to come clean now. "It's like you can read my thoughts," Chris said playfully. "I bet the men at the party will be lining up to sit with you. In that case, maybe you should lend me your card so I can find something special for the occasion." Ashley playfully glanced at Chris again. "So, Mr. Sales Manager, should I go for stylish or more casual?" Chris's reaction made it clear he was having trouble hiding his feelings. After a few moments of taking deep breaths, Chris calmed down. He gently brushed his fingers against Ashley's arm. "It's nice to relax like this and enjoy each other's company. It feels good not to worry about everyday stresses." Ashley leaned back and rested her head on his shoulder. "It's times like these that make everything worthwhile, you know, all the hard work, the long nights, the pressure. It all led to this." Chris nodded, looking serious for a moment. "I'm glad we went through it together. It made us stronger. Now we get to enjoy the rewards." Ashley opened her eyes and smiled at him. "I love you, Chris." He smiled back and leaned in to give her a gentle kiss. "I love you too, Ash." As the sun began to set, shining a warm light over their backyard, they kept talking, dreaming, and making plans. The feeling of accomplishment and safety around them was strong, especially after the tough times they had faced. That evening after dinner, Chris came up behind Ashley as she tidied up the kitchen. He hugged her from behind and breathed in her familiar scent. "You smell amazing," he said softly. "Is this what it felt like when someone was close to you?" Ashley felt a slight tension at the memory, but it also brought a hint of excitement. She remembered that day clearly when the janitor had been right behind her, and she had told Chris about it in detail. A playful smile spread across her face. "You mean when he helped me reach something on that high shelf? I could really feel how close he was to me." Her voice dropped a little, adding a playful tone. Chris held her closer, his voice lowering a bit. "That's it. I like knowing that got you all flustered." His hands moved gently over her body, stirring up their shared playful moments. "I still wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been interrupted." Ashley felt a rush as his touch brought back memories. "I couldn't stop thinking about it," she said softly, leaning back into him. "How easily he had me feeling nervous. Maybe I would have let him take charge. What would you have said then?" In a flash, Chris's mood changed. He turned Ashley around and playfully pushed her against the wall. He spoke in a deeper voice, pretending to be the janitor from her thoughts. "You're just full of surprises, aren't you?" he teased, his tone light but playful, strutting around, making it hard for anyone not to notice. A thrill ran through Ashley as Chris acted out the role, and she found herself lost in the moment. Their playful exchange blurred the lines between reality and imagination. She could almost smell the old smoke and strong cleaners that clung to his worn clothes that day. "Yeah, that's it," the rough voice teased as Ashley shifted uncomfortably against him. "I can see it in your eyes how much you want this." Her breath caught as her mind raced with thoughts. What if she hadn't run away from that close moment? What if her basic feelings had taken over her will? The image of the janitor blocking her in against the wall flashed behind Ashley's closed eyes. His strong hands moved beneath her uniform, gripping her as he pressed closer. A soft sound slipped from Ashley's lips as Chris continued the fantasy, whispering teasing words in her ear. "That's right. Let the janitor take care of you. I'll give you what you really need." Lost in the dream, Ashley barely noticed her body moving against Chris, responding to his presence. The thoughts and feelings grew stronger, almost too overwhelming. Ashley gasped as Chris shifted closer, but part of her felt excited. His arms enclosed her, making her feel pinned against the wall behind her. "I saw the way you looked at me," he said, his voice low. It felt like the janitor himself had come to life through their shared feelings. "I wanted to give you what you desired." Her mind wandered to thoughts of being held close as he moved his hands over her sides. The fantasy made her heart race as Chris kept playing his role. "You've been quite the mischievous one, haven't you?" As Chris maintained the game, his grip tightened, sending a rush of excitement through Ashley. The line between their play and true feelings blended together in a thrilling way. He stepped back just a little so she could breathe, his eyes dark with emotion and playful intent. "You've been naughty," Chris said, his tone now his own but still serious. "And naughty ones need a little guidance." Ashley shuddered in anticipation, her thoughts swirling with what the night might bring. Ashley felt a chill at Chris's intense look, his eyes filled with a mix of warmth and confidence. His voice was low as he leaned in close, murmuring softly, "Maybe it's time you learned a real lesson." She held her breath, feeling a spark of excitement in his words, which seemed playful yet serious. Chris took her hand gently, guiding her toward the bedroom where the dim light cast soft shadows around them, creating a warm and peaceful space. Setting her down gently on the bed, Chris took a step back, his gaze soft yet focused as he looked at her with admiration. Ashley felt a mix of vulnerability and trust in his presence, noticing how his expression was one of deep care. He reached out to touch her shoulder, his hand trailing softly down her arm, making her feel grounded and calm. "You're amazing," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "I hope you know that." Ashley's pulse quickened as she felt the gentle reassurance in his words. She laughed softly, feeling her worries fade as they shared a moment of closeness. Chris wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into a hug that was both strong and tender. She felt safe, the world outside their shared space fading away as they enjoyed each other's warmth. They stayed close, each wrapped in the quiet, peaceful moment. Ashley leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling a deep calm wash over her. As they stood there, Chris whispered, "I'm glad you're here with me." The comfort of his presence reassured her, easing any lingering doubts. The peace between them was suddenly interrupted by the faint ring of a phone. They both chuckled at the timing, and Ashley broke away with a smile, feeling more relaxed and content than she had in a long time. As she moved to answer the call, she realized that in this moment she felt completely at ease, grounded by the simple comfort of being understood and cared for. In a tense exchange, Chris glanced at Ashley, his expression both intense and focused. "You always carry yourself with so much confidence," he said with a small, playful smile, "like you know exactly what you want." Ashley felt her breath catch, unsure of how to respond, but sensing the energy shift. She gave a small laugh, the lightness in his tone easing her own nerves. Chris's hands moved to her shoulders, guiding her as they walked toward the quiet of the nearby room. There was an air of familiarity between them, one that brought a sense of comfort and reassurance. Once they were alone, Chris looked at her thoughtfully, pausing before he spoke. "We rarely get time to talk like this," he said, his tone softer. "I'm glad we're here." Ashley nodded, feeling a similar sense of appreciation for the moment. They had both been swept up in their busy lives, and this quiet time gave them a chance to reconnect. They sat side by side, talking about the past, their shared memories, and the small things they often forgot to mention. The conversation drifted to the day-to-day stories that had been left unshared. Chris smiled, teasing her about her work stories, bringing up light-hearted memories and creating a relaxed atmosphere. Ashley felt herself laughing at his playful remarks, feeling the tension of the day fade away. As they spoke, Ashley felt a gentle warmth in the room, a reminder of the steady companionship they shared. She realized how grateful she was for these moments of simple, honest connection. Ashley felt a spark of excitement as she browsed through the boutique, searching for the perfect outfit for an upcoming party. Chris's words, hinting that everyone would notice her, played in her mind, making her smile. She wasn't entirely used to this bolder side of herself, but the thrill of it urged her on. As her fingers brushed over smooth, silky fabrics, she pictured how each piece might look, each one designed to make an impression. She caught herself wondering about Clayton's reaction if he saw her like this. The thought surprised her, bringing a mix of excitement and hesitation. Part of her enjoyed imagining the attention, but she knew she was walking a fine line. In the fitting room, Ashley took a deep breath as she slipped into a sleek, red dress that clung perfectly to her curves. Turning to the mirror, she admired the way the fabric hugged her, highlighting her silhouette. She knew Chris would be thrilled by this choice. He'd always encouraged her to feel confident and bold. The idea of turning heads at the party made her smile. As she adjusted the dress, she felt a small thrill imagining the reactions it might draw. With a final look in the mirror, Ashley knew she was ready to embrace the attention not for anyone else, but to feel strong and self-assured in her own skin. She gathered her things and left the fitting room, ready to step into the evening with confidence and excitement. The thought excited and scared Ashley at the same time. She felt a strong urge to tease Clayton, showing off her look as the ultimate lure. Still, she was worried about how things had gone too far the last time. She hadn't told Chris the whole story about that night, seeing Clayton with another woman and how she felt while watching them. It filled her with a mix of shame and thrill. With a playful smile, Ashley took a photo of herself, wanting to capture her attractive look. She hesitated a moment before sending a text that read, "Do you think Clayton would like this?" Chris replied with a mix of excitement and concern. "Wow, Ash. Are you really trying to test him? You know how stunning you are. It might make it tough for me to stick to my note-etching rule." He added a wink emoji, but she could sense his worry. A warm blush spread across Ashley's face as she read his message, feeling a rush of thrill but also a hint of doubt. Was she crossing a line? She quickly pushed the thought aside, letting Chris's thoughts wander. For the next hour, she tried on different outfits, each one a bit more daring. With each new look, she imagined how Clayton might see her, his eyes tracing her curves. She wanted to play with him, to show that she was in control, but in the back of her mind, she worried about losing that control. As she thought about how her boldness might affect Clayton, she felt mixed emotions. She wanted to be better than him, but feared pushing too far. Then, a black outfit in the corner caught her eye. The soft fabric promised a dramatic look. Filled with excitement, she hurried to the changing room. What she saw in the mirror took her breath away and made her rethink her path, even if just for a moment. The top had a very low cut that showed a lot more than she was used to. The material hugged her figure perfectly, but the bottom truly made her heart race. High slits started at mid-thigh, revealing her legs with each step, and the sheer panels offered little coverage. When she turned around to check the back, she admired the deep scoop that left her shoulders bare and how the hem rose higher than she would usually choose, fitting tightly around her curves. Ashley bit her lip, imagining how Chris would react if he saw her in this outfit. The thought of catching people's admiration made her heart race with excitement. This dress pushed her comfort level more than ever, but that was what made it so exciting. Chris had said he wanted people eager to get her attention, and that was exactly what this dress would do. Ashley knew she'd be the center of attention all night, with everyone watching closely. Ashley thought twice before sending Chris the picture, realizing she had a better idea. This bold outfit deserved to be seen in person. Instead, she would surprise him at the party. She even bought a red dress, just in case this one was too much. A playful smile spread across her face as she collected her purchases. She could hardly wait to see Chris's reaction to the daring dress. Chris leaned back in his chair, pleased with the sales reports in front of him. Katie's numbers had been steadily rising, with her success rate almost at 100%. He remembered when he first met her, a shy young woman. Back then, he wondered if she would grow into her role in sales. Things had certainly changed. Now, Katie showed confidence that sometimes made Chris forget he was her boss. Her style had also evolved, with her choosing outfits that turned heads and received compliments from her co-workers. A gentle knock on the conference room door brought Chris back to reality. Speak of the devil. The Reynolds account? Katie entered and took a seat across from him, adjusting her outfit as she sat down. Chris found it hard to look away, but he quickly refocused. Yes, I want us to make a strong impression to win them over. His voice came out a bit rough as Katie leaned in, and Chris felt a rush of heat. Katie smiled, her expression playful. I have some ideas that could help with that, she said, holding his gaze with confidence. There was something in the air that caught Chris off guard. He shifted in his seat, trying to stay composed. Oh, I'm listening. Well, Katie began, tracing her finger along her blouse. I thought an in-person presentation might be better than our usual method. Chris thought about it, making sure to keep his eyes on her face. An in-person meeting had worked wonders before when he secured a big deal. Do you think a more personal meeting would make a difference? Exactly. Katie smiled again, drawing his attention to her lips. We need to think creatively and use everything we can to succeed. There was a hint of intensity in her voice that made Chris pause, a shiver running down his arms. He brushed it off, convinced it was just his thoughts about Ashley playing tricks on him. You make a good point. Being there in person was key for closing the Larkin deal. Chris nodded slowly, trying not to focus on the meaning behind her tone. Okay, let's go with that. Keep me updated on how things go. Of course, Katie replied, her voice dropping slightly, and Chris felt an unsettling tightness in his chest as she held his gaze for a moment too long. I'll make sure to take care of everything they need. A bead of sweat formed at the back of Chris's neck as Katie wrapped up her notes and started talking about travel plans. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was hinting at something much more than just a regular sales presentation. Across the hall, Clayton's office door opened. He walked to the center of the floor, and Chris noticed hushed conversations pause as Clayton cleared his throat. Listen up. I have exciting news about our upcoming party. He raised an arm, enjoying the moment as curious whispers turned into a buzz. Since our company is growing, we'll celebrate at the Rivermont's Grand Ballroom. The company is also covering fancy hotel rooms. Cheers and applause erupted. Clayton soaked in the positive energy before continuing. But that's not all. I'll be sending special invitations to our top clients. Another wave of cheers and applause filled the room, echoing with excitement as Clayton raised his hands, clearly enjoying the crowd's enthusiasm. As the clapping slowed, He flashed a confident smile, his eyes sweeping over the audience. "A chance to connect and strengthen important relationships," Clayton said with a playful wink. "You all know I enjoy mixing business with a little fun." His comment felt directed at someone, but before Chris could turn to look, Katie spoke up. "Sadly, I'll be missing it. The Reynolds deal is heating up." "No rest for the busy, right, Katie?" Clayton laughed, his expression both amused and sly. "Guess we'll work extra hard for you." This inside joke between them left Chris puzzled. As the chatter continued, Chris couldn't shake his discomfort. He still hadn't told Ashley about the awkward photo incident with Tom months ago, wishing it would stay forgotten. But now he worried it might come up again. After the meeting, Chris went to Clayton's office. The way Clayton looked at Ashley made Chris uneasy. "Do you have a moment?" Chris knocked on the open door. Clayton looked up with a friendly smile. "For you? Always. Please have a seat." Chris settled onto the comfortable sofa, trying to sound relaxed even though he felt uneasy. "I wanted to talk about the invitations for the party. You can bet Ashford will be at the top of that list," Clayton interrupted with a laugh. "We'd be foolish not to impress him at every chance we get." Chris frowned, but kept his worries vague. "I've noticed Ashford seems to be interested in Ashley." Clayton raised an eyebrow. "You think he's trying to make a move on her?" Chris felt heat rise to his face at the blunt words. He pushed away thoughts of the evening he and Ashley spent at Clayton's house a while ago. He shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe I'm just worrying too much, but you know how Ashford is." Clayton leaned back, fingers steepled. "I wouldn't stress over it, Chris. Guys like him just talk tough until you challenge them. He may make rude comments, but he knows better than to go too far." His tone was overly confident, doing little to ease Chris's concerns. As Clayton moved on to other topics, Chris couldn't shake his fears. Unbeknownst to him, Clayton's mind drifted back to that intense moment with Ashley months earlier, how she had watched him in shock, how playful words exchanged heated moments. A sly smile spread across Clayton's face. Ashley may have left without him getting too close, but he had sensed her interest beneath her denials, a strong attraction he looked forward to igniting. This party, filled with excitement and celebration, could be a perfect chance to truly engage with Ashley again. Maybe he could even create a situation for a memorable time together with her and Chris. As the party approached, Chris felt a constant undercurrent of tension, no matter how hard he tried to embrace the joyful mood. He couldn't shake his nervousness about Tom Ashford being there after that embarrassing incident months ago. Just thinking of him staring at Ashley or making unwelcome comments made Chris uncomfortable. Chris loved the idea of Ashley discovering new sides of herself in their private moments together, but he didn't want someone like Tom intruding in that special space. The playful moments they shared, the parts of Ashley that Chris brought out just for him, he didn't want her to feel objectified by someone else. He briefly thought about warning Ashley about Tom. It might prepare her if he behaved inappropriately, but even briefly admitting he had kept something from her could harm the trust in their relationship. After thinking it over, Chris decided to stay quiet for now and promised to be by Ashley's side. The night before the party, Clayton pulled Chris aside to discuss the final details. "I have an idea to make this event successful," Clayton started. "It's important for us to mingle and make our guests feel welcome and appreciated." He watched Chris closely, noticing his discomfort. Clayton's lips curved into a careful smile as he continued. "I know you have some doubts about Ashley coming, but hear me out." Chris shifted uneasily in his seat, his hands moving restlessly. "I guess keeping our clients happy is important. What do you suggest?" A calculating look came into Clayton's eyes. "If Ashley could dance with our guests during the evening, it would help them feel relaxed and appreciated. I'll talk to Tom and make sure he is not overstepping." Chris raised an eyebrow, feeling skeptical about Clayton's intentions, but Clayton quickly eased those worries with a friendly laugh. "Think of it this way, you get to show off your beautiful wife, and our clients get the special treatment we pride ourselves on." The suggestion hung in the air between them. Clayton could see Chris considering whether to agree. Finally, Chris nodded. "I guess that would be okay. Just make sure Tom stays respectful." "Absolutely," Clayton promised with an easy grin, looking forward to making sure Ashley had a good time. The night of the party arrived, and Chris was speechless as Ashley appeared in a beautiful black dress that fitted her perfectly. "Wow," he said, his eyes taking in how stunning she looked. "You look amazing. That dress is something." Ashley twirled nervously, a hint of doubt on her face. "Is it too much? I have a red dress too if this is too bold." Chris's expression softened as he admired her. "Why would you want to hide such beauty? Not a chance." "But I feel so over the top," she admitted, blushing. "Maybe I should wear the red one instead." "Seriously?" Chris looked at her, impressed. "You look absolutely fantastic." "That dress suits you perfectly," Chris said, stepping closer and tracing his finger along the edge of the neckline. "Don't even think about covering it up." Ashley hesitated, looking down. "But it's so revealing, I feel like everyone will stare." "Exactly." Chris held her close, his tone confident. "Every man in that room will be drawn to you." His words made her heart race. "You? Want them to notice me like that?" "Absolutely." He gently lifted her chin, meeting her eyes. "Let them see how stunning you are. They'll all wish they could be me tonight." A thrill ran through Ashley as she absorbed his words. She bit her lip, thinking it over, then nodded slightly. "All right, if that's what you want," she replied with a small smile, half joking, "but don't blame me if they can't resist." Chris chuckled, giving her a quick kiss. "That's the plan. You're going to turn every head tonight, and afterward you're all mine." When they walked into the ballroom together, Ashley instantly felt the weight of several gazes following her every move. She wasn't used to such attention, but part of her felt both excited and a little nervous. As they moved through the room, it was clear she had made an impression. Her confidence grew with each glance, though her heart still beat fast. She felt both a sense of freedom and slight unease, stepping so boldly outside her usual comfort zone. Chris leaned close, murmuring, "You feel all those eyes on you, don't you?" His hand rested lightly on her back, reminding her of the dress's daring cut. Ashley shivered at his words, feeling the subtle thrill of being in the spotlight. Just then, a client approached and politely invited her to dance. Knowing it was good manners, she accepted, giving Chris a reassuring smile before heading to the dance floor. As she began to dance, Ashley was highly aware of how she looked in the dress. Each turn and sway felt like part of a performance, her every move drawing attention. Though new to her, the experience was unexpectedly exhilarating, a reminder of her own confidence and strength as she shared a smile with her dance partner and let herself enjoy the moment. Ashley held back a soft sound, feeling many eyes on her. It wasn't just her partner's gaze, it seemed like every man around her was watching intently. As the dance finished, her partner leaned closer, desire clear on his face. Ashley briefly thought about giving in to the moment. Before she could act on that thought, Chris stepped in smoothly, wrapping his arm around her waist, pulling her toward him. "Thanks for keeping her company," he said playfully, drawing Ashley close. Her previous partner looked surprised but nodded politely before blending back into the crowd. Ashley's heart raced with a mix of lingering excitement and relief. "You look like a prize display," Chris said with a chuckle, pulling her in even tighter. This night had turned into something intense and unexpected. After each dance, Chris's eyes roamed over her as he offered her a fresh glass of champagne. With each sip, she felt more relaxed. He knew she wouldn't usually act this way, but their playful fantasy had taken root. He anticipated that once they were back in their room, they would share a passionate moment. "Seeing all these guys admire you is driving me wild," he whispered in her ear. "They all want to be close to you right now." A rush of excitement flowed through Ashley at his words. She lightly traced her fingers on his chest. "Is that what you want? To show everyone I'm with you?" Chris let out a low sound of approval as he held her close, warmth radiating from him. "You wouldn't mind being the center of attention, would you?" As his words filled the air, the tension between them grew strong. Ashley and Chris felt drawn to each other, the urge to be together almost overwhelming. The champagne, feelings, and awareness of being so visible wrapped around Ashley. Many eyes were on her, assessing her and imagining. It could have made her feel embarrassed, but instead she felt a thrill, an electric charge in the air that excited her. A small part of her wanted to hold on to her dignity, but the excitement was building, making it hard to think about anything else but getting back to their room. Chris lightly brushed his lips against hers, drinking in her every breath. "Tell me what you want tonight, Ash." Before she could answer, someone else was already asking Ashley to dance, stepping in behind Chris. However, this wasn't just any client. Tom Ashford stood before them. His tall and striking presence caught Ashley's attention, making her mind wander a bit as she thought about the playful interaction she and Chris had shared earlier. Chris turned around with a welcoming smile. "Tom! I'm really glad you could come. Let me introduce you to my wonderful wife, Ashley." Tom looked at Ashley closely, a look of appreciation on his face. "The pleasure is all mine. I've heard a lot about you, Ashley, and from what I see tonight, it seems Chris has told the truth about you." Before Ashley could ask what he meant, Clayton appeared beside them. "If it isn't my favorite client! Tom, I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." Clayton leaned in to whisper something to Tom, which only Tom could hear. Tom nodded, though he looked a bit let down. With a smile directed at Ashley, Tom took her hand and lightly brushed his lips across it. "I must insist on a dance if that's all right with you." Chris glanced at Clayton, who nodded back slightly. This silent communication reassured Chris that everything was fine. Tom guided Ashley to the dance floor, leaving Chris and Clayton behind, watching them closely over their drinks. As the first soft notes of the song began, Tom respectfully placed his other hand on Ashley's waist, bringing her in closer. His touch was calming, even while the intensity in his eyes was evident. "It's a joy to finally meet the woman I've heard so much about." His charming smile met Ashley's gaze. "He speaks so highly of you. It feels like I know you from his stories." Ashley felt herself relax a little at his polite demeanor. "Thank you, that's very kind of you. I'm afraid Chris may have exaggerated my good qualities." Tom laughed lightly. "I doubt that. If anything, I'd say he didn't fully capture just how lovely you are in person." He looked her over briefly before returning his gaze to her eyes. Feeling a little shy from his direct attention, Ashley quickly changed the topic. "Chris is really excited about the deal with Larkin. It has helped keep the company on a good path." Tom's eyes lit up at her words. "Is that so? We're pleased with it as well. Your husband gave an impressive presentation when he was here. He really won many people over." "I'm glad to hear that. He put in a lot of effort to make that partnership happen," Ashley said, unaware of the calculating look that passed over Tom's face. "Closing this deal meant a great deal to him. I can't say enough how important your business is to us." "Quite diligent of him," Tom said smoothly, revealing nothing. "Though I can't say I'm surprised, considering his clear motivation." His eyes glanced briefly to her dress before returning to meet her gaze. Ashley felt herself blush again, a strange mix of embarrassment and excitement moving through her. She wasn't used to such direct compliments from other men. As the dance finished, Tom gently kissed her hand, lingering for a moment in a way that felt warm and personal. He gave a quick look towards Chris and Clayton, who were watching them closely. "And I don't want to disappoint anyone, to be honest." With a final wink, Tom let go of her hand and faded back into the crowd, leaving Ashley feeling flustered and curious about what he meant by that last comment. Back at their table, Chris and Clayton observed Ashley with admiration. She was doing great tonight, charming the clients and making them feel comfortable. "You know, she'd be impressive in sales too," Clayton noted, watching the way Ashley moved. Chris nodded as he kept an eye on Ashley and Tom on the dance floor. Tom seemed to be on his best behavior, but Chris still felt a twinge of worry that Tom might say something awkward. They appeared to be having a good conversation, and although Tom was being quite charming, it didn't seem overly obvious. Clayton's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Look at you," he said, giving Chris a friendly pat on the back. "Top sales guy, big new client, I'm impressed." Chris managed a small smile. "Maybe you should have had a bit more faith in me." "Maybe you're right," Clayton replied with a playful grin. "Tell you what, no more holding back. I think you've earned it." Chris frowned, puzzled as he looked at Clayton. "What do you mean?" Clayton smiled, momentarily turning away from Ashley. "I've got a couple of other big deals in the works. I've been working closely on one that has a couple thousand users. Another one that Katie is managing could bring in close to 4,000. Wow. If we land those along with what we already have. I know it would be massive. I'm thinking maybe I should put our top sales guy on it. Perhaps give you another chance at equity? Clayton winked before looking back at Tom and Ashley. She looked amazing tonight. I'd love to dance with her. While Chris felt thrilled at the thought of another opportunity for equity, a protective feeling surged within him. He opened his mouth to speak, but Clayton quickly waved him off. No, don't get upset, my friend. I understand the rules. A smile appeared on Clayton's face. But I remember a bet you lost, so it seems like you owe me. What are you suggesting? Chris asked, suddenly feeling uncertain. Clayton leaned in closer. Why don't we agree to set aside that no-touching rule tonight? Clayton suggested, flashing a grin. I just want a dance or two. That's all I'm asking. Chris felt a pang of unease as he realized what Clayton was proposing. That's my wife you're talking about, he replied, his tone a mix of tension and disbelief. She'd be furious if she knew she was part of some bet. Clayton raised his hands, feigning innocence with a smirk. Relax, Romeo. She doesn't need to know any of that. Just tell her you're loosening up, trying to have a bit of fun. She won't mind. His easy confidence left Chris unsettled, unsure of how to respond. Clayton nodded toward the dance floor, where Ashley was saying a quick goodbye to her dance partner before heading back to their table. When the song ended, Ashley returned to the table, flushed and catching her breath. Could you grab us a couple of drinks? She asked, sliding into the chair between Chris and Clayton. Chris's thoughts were a whirl of uncertainty and intrigue as he recalled Clayton's suggestion. Part of him felt it was time to end the night and head back to their room, but another part of him wondered where this might lead, if Ashley would even enjoy the spontaneity of it all. Before Chris could respond, Clayton spoke up smoothly. Sorry to interrupt, he said with a practiced charm, but I was hoping to borrow this lovely lady for a dance. Ashley looked from Clayton to Chris, a mix of surprise and curiosity in her eyes. She wasn't sure if this was part of some unspoken game, pushing the boundaries to see who would step back first. Chris hesitated but gave a small nod, meeting her gaze with a look of uncertainty but quiet approval. Go ahead, he murmured, giving her a reassuring smile. I'll get those drinks. As the lively music played, Clayton stood up gracefully from his seat, offering Ashley his hand. Let me help you, he said with a playful smile as Chris walked toward the bar. Ashley felt a thrill as Clayton took her hand, drawing her close on the dance floor. His other hand rested on her hip, bringing them closer together as they began to move to the rhythm. You look amazing tonight, Clayton said softly, taking in her appearance. Ashley smiled and leaned in a bit. You're looking quite good yourself. She found herself enjoying the playful moment as they danced. With that, she moved her hips, playfully pushing back against him. She brushed her fingers through his hair as she leaned closer. It seems someone is enjoying the view, she teased. Just be careful. We don't want to get too carried away. Clayton laughed, his hands exploring her waist as they danced. Like you did that night at my place? He leaned closer, his lips near her ear. Ashley felt herself blush as she leaned against him. Do you still think I'm selfish? He teased, making her heart race as they moved together. Across the room, Chris watched intently. Seeing Ashley dance so freely made him feel a mix of excitement and a bit of jealousy. Part of him wanted to go over and take her back. Yet another part was intrigued, curious to see how enthusiastic she would be later. Maybe he would pretend to be Clayton too, he thought, feeling his own excitement grow. On the dance floor, Ashley nestled closer to Clayton. You seem to remember that night well. Do you think about it often? How could I forget? Clayton replied, glancing at her dress. You were quite the sight that night. Don't pretend you didn't enjoy it. The air felt charged as Ashley moved against him. As the song came to an end, Clayton lightly touched her neck. If we're counting, I believe it's your turn for a special show, he said, a teasing promise in his voice as they headed back to the bar. As the music stopped, Clayton slowly let go of Ashley, his fingers trailing along her side until the last moment. A charged look passed between them before he turned and walked across the room. Ashley felt warm and a bit shaky as she made her way back to Chris at the bar, who was holding 2 fresh drinks. His eyes scanned her appearance with a playful curiosity. You two seemed pretty close out there, he said softly. Ashley licked her lips, surprised by the intensity of his gaze. "We were just dancing," she replied with a smile. "Really?" Chris raised an eyebrow, a small grin on his face. From here it looked like he was really into you. He stepped closer, his lips near her ear. "Were you trying to get his attention, knowing how much he could see?" Ashley felt a shiver at his words. Before she could answer, Clayton appeared next to her. "Looks like the night is winding down for most of our guests." Clayton shot her a warm glance. "I should say goodbye to everyone." With one last meaningful look, Clayton walked away to talk to some guests. Ashley turned back to Chris, her heart racing. "So," she took a deep breath, "where does this leave us?" Chris's gaze lingered on her. "Well, we have a few choices. We could call it a night and go back to our room." He trailed off, his lips near her neck, sending a spark through her. Ashley felt her heart race at the idea, but part of her wanted to explore this playful moment further. "Or?" she asked, her voice light. Chris paused, thinking about what to say. Before he could respond, a bold idea crossed Ashley's mind. "What if," she started, lowering her voice, "we invited Clayton up for a nightcap?" Chris felt excitement build in him at the idea. The thought of Clayton watching them made his heart beat faster. He nodded, caught up in the moment. "Yeah," he said, "that could be interesting." He leaned closer, kissing her softly on the collarbone. Ashley leaned in, her breath warm against Chris's ear. "Last chance to back out?" she teased, lightly tracing his arm, making him breathe sharply. "Do you really want to see Clayton again seeing me like this?" His answer came quickly, his voice low. "The way you were dancing earlier, I could tell you wanted something to happen." Chris pulled her closer, brushing his lips against her ear. "Honestly, the way everyone is looking at you, wishing they were the ones with you, it drives me crazy." His hand moved gently along her back, bringing her closer as their lips met. Ashley softly sighed against his kiss. "I love you so much." Their sweet moment was interrupted when Clayton cleared his throat. He had seen the last of the guests off and hurried back to them, sensing things were about to change. "Well now." His smooth voice reached them. "Looks like you two are ready to wind down." With a playful smile, Ashley said, "Would you like to join us?" The couple exchanged faint smiles, a spark of excitement shining in their eyes as they headed toward the elevator. As the elevator doors closed, the air felt thick with tension. Ashley was pressed against the wall, Chris close to her, their lips meeting eagerly. Chris's hands moved over the curves of Ashley's dress, leaving her breathless with surprise. Chris's mind raced with thoughts, imagining Clayton watching them. Unbeknownst to him, Clayton had different ideas for the night. He was ready to shift the balance of their little game. Clayton observed them with keen interest, a satisfied smile appearing on his face. When the elevator chimed open on their floor, Chris reluctantly pulled away to find their room key. As he searched, Clayton stepped closer to Ashley, letting his fingers brush lightly down her back. She felt a tingle from the unexpected touch. Finally finding the key card, Chris ushered them into the room, closing the door swiftly behind them. As soon as it was shut, he had Ashley against it again, their lips finding each other eagerly. Clayton cleared his throat. "Why don't you two make yourselves comfortable while I grab us some drinks?" Ashley pulled away, teasingly frowning at Chris. "You know, you were the only person at that party I didn't dance with." Chris flashed her a mischievous grin. After a few taps on his phone, a lively beat filled the room. He began swaying, giving her an exaggerated look as he pretended to unbutton his shirt dramatically. Ashley watched her husband's playful moves with amusement and a hint of affection. After a few moments of his comical performance, she finally interrupted, playfully pushing him back. Okay, mister, I think that's enough of those silly moves," she laughed, guiding him until he stumbled back onto the bed. "Why don't you let me show you how it's really done?" Chris said with a playful smile, settling into his seat. Ashley, with a confident grin, began to sway with the soft music, adjusting the rhythm and mood in the room. Slowly, she traced her fingers along the neckline of her dress, moving with grace as she swayed. Clayton, standing nearby with a glass in hand, watched with interest, the low lighting casting a warm glow over the room. She moved closer to Chris, inviting him to join her in the dance. He stood, smiling, and placed his hands lightly on her waist, guiding their movement. They danced to the soft beat, their steps in sync, both laughing and lost in the easy connection between them. As they turned in rhythm around the room, the atmosphere remained light-hearted, yet charged with anticipation. But then Ashley felt Clayton step closer, joining the dance with them. She looked at Chris, a bit surprised, unsure if he was comfortable with the shift. Chris met her gaze and gave her a small nod, showing that he was okay with it. Clayton's presence changed the dynamic, and for a moment Ashley felt the thrill of an unexpected shared connection. But as the evening continued, she noticed Chris keeping an eye on her, offering a reassuring smile now and then. His support grounded her, and they continued to enjoy the night, each of them finding something meaningful in the shared experience. With the music slowing, Ashley took a deep breath, appreciating the bond they shared and feeling a sense of contentment as the evening wound down. Ashley felt the pull of the moment, caught in a mix of sensations and emotions. The room seemed charged with energy, her heart pounding as she and Chris shared an intense moment of connection. Chris, watching her closely, appeared uncertain yet drawn in, mirroring her own blend of excitement and uncertainty. Clayton, observing from the side, respected the unspoken boundary, watching as Chris and Ashley moved closer. The light-hearted dance they had begun earlier had shifted to something deeper, a moment that tested the trust and closeness between them. Chris leaned in, brushing his hand along her arm, anchoring her focus to him as they shared a quiet exchange that needed no words. As Clayton watched, he sensed the careful balance between comfort and curiosity in the air. Chris turned to him, offering a subtle nod, acknowledging his presence but clearly signaling that he and Ashley were focusing on each other now. Ashley looked between them, feeling a warm sense of reassurance from Chris's steady gaze. In that moment, any lingering tension softened, replaced by mutual respect and understanding among all three. With a smile, Clayton stepped back, allowing them the space to share in their moment. Ashley's gaze met Chris's, and together, they found themselves grounded in each other's presence, their closeness renewed as they enjoyed the rest of the evening in a comfortable, shared silence. "If you want these gone," he said in a low, firm voice, "then you'll have to handle it yourself." He lightly touched her shoulder, sending a slight chill through her. A quiet anticipation filled the room as Clayton allowed his words to linger. Ashley's heart beat quickly as she met his gaze, feeling both excitement and hesitation. Part of her still wondered if this was the right path to take, despite how far they'd come in their playful teasing. Chris found himself torn between two strong emotions. One side of him felt protective, almost territorial, as he watched someone so close to his wife. Yet, there was also a growing part of him that wanted to support her freedom to explore her true desires, free from hesitation or judgment. Clayton observed them with a calm and knowing look, sensing that his words and actions had led them to this very moment. He remained steady, confident that time would bring them to make their choice. The three of them were caught in a moment of silent understanding, each feeling the weight of their decisions and the anticipation of what lay ahead. "How do you manage this every day?" she asked with a playful smile as her fingers moved along his arm, causing Clayton to let out a quiet breath. From his spot beside her, Chris watched something he hadn't expected, a moment of clear fascination in her expression as she held Clayton's hand. It was difficult to understand. A part of him felt uneasy, yet he couldn't deny the intrigue he felt watching her with this new openness. He took a steadying breath, trying to process the moment. He understood that perhaps curiosity and the warmth of the evening had led her to this. The unspoken connection between them allowed him to relax, even as she explored this new side of herself. Clayton glanced at Chris, a confident look in his eyes, as if he had anticipated this unfolding. There was a shared understanding here that this moment was inevitable, a point they'd slowly arrived at over time. It was a moment Chris sensed might come but hadn't fully prepared for. As she caught Chris's gaze, Ashley took a small pause, her face flushed. She looked at Chris, perhaps checking if he was comfortable, but there was an unspoken permission in his eyes. She shifted closer, leaning toward him with a steady look, holding onto his hand and drawing strength from his silent encouragement. They remained there in a soft, reflective silence, each caught in the warmth of the moment, with only the sound of their breathing filling the air. Chris felt a deep, shared connection as he watched his wife let go of her reservations, both of them allowing the moment to unfold naturally. For what felt like a long, timeless pause, they sat together, exchanging glances filled with trust and a new understanding of each other. Ashley sat with Clayton nearby, feeling the strange tension in the room. Chris was observing, clearly caught between conflicting emotions. Clayton spoke with a quiet confidence, his words aiming to provoke. Chris took a deep breath, hoping to hold on to the connection he and Ashley shared despite the surreal situation. Ashley glanced back at Chris, her eyes holding a silent question. As if reading her, he gave a nod, assuring her of his presence. She turned to him with a warm look, reaching out to touch his hand, finding a steadying comfort in the moment. Chris felt a rush of emotions, from uncertainty to a strange sense of peace, as he watched Ashley express herself freely. Though there were still questions in his mind, he could feel the strength of their bond. The three sat together quietly, letting the moment speak for itself, as each of them reflected on the trust and understanding that had led them here. For a long time they remained in this shared silence, each lost in thought but connected by a shared experience that needed no further explanation. Each shared moment seemed to spark something powerful and intense between Ashley and Clayton, creating a sense of connection with every glance and gesture. "Is this what you pictured?" Ashley asked quietly, looking back at Chris. She spoke with a soft intensity, surprised at how real this moment felt. Chris felt himself drawn further into her words, sensing her curiosity as she held his gaze, leaning into the experience. Chris placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, feeling a mix of emotions strong yet deeply rooted in trust and understanding. With each moment, Ashley felt her confidence growing, leaning closer to Chris, grateful for his support. He knew this was an important experience for her, and his own heart raced as he felt her unwavering gaze on him, feeling the strength in their bond. Time seemed to blur as they shared a moment that spoke to both curiosity and trust, each feeling deeply connected. They embraced this time together, finding meaning in each shared glance and supportive touch, bound by understanding and a quiet strength that underscored their bond. Ashley was lost in the moment, her energy fully focused on Clayton. Chris watched, feeling a mix of emotions he couldn't quite sort out. The scene was intense, yet a sense of shared understanding kept him grounded. As they moved through this strange experience together, Chris felt a rush of unexpected acceptance. He looked at Ashley, seeing her openness and self-confidence, and found himself quietly proud of her freedom in expressing herself. It was a new and unique moment, one he hadn't anticipated but could see mattered to her. Clayton's confident demeanor revealed that he knew the impact of this shared moment. He looked to Chris with a knowing expression, and Chris met his gaze, feeling oddly reassured by the shared experience. This time together, though unexpected, was something they all felt the weight of. As the evening continued, each person seemed to gain a better understanding of one another, settling into a quiet calm after the intensity. It was a moment of connection, leaving them all with a sense of closeness and understanding that they would carry forward together. Chris had never experienced anything like that before. Clayton stepped back, looking at Ashley as she lay on the bed, tired. He wore a proud smile as he picked up his clothes. Before leaving, Clayton turned to Chris and said, "Don't be too hard on yourself. Things might have gotten a bit wild, but you know deep down you wanted this." Chris opened his mouth but couldn't find the words. He just sat there, feeling vulnerable and confused by what had just happened. "I think you'll find you liked it more than you think. Next time will be even better," Clayton added with a smirk before leaving the room. Chris was left alone trying to understand what Clayton had said. Did he mean next time? Was there going to be a next time? Did he want that? Did Ashley? Just then he noticed Ashley getting up. "I'm going to shower. I need you to be with me again," she said softly, giving him a warm smile before stepping into the bathroom. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, brightening the room. Chris opened his eyes slowly, the memories of the previous night flooding back. He glanced at Ashley, still asleep beside him, her chest rising and falling with each gentle breath. The images from the night before filled his mind, causing a twist of emotions within him. Ashley stirred and smiled at Chris, and suddenly she remembered everything. A wave of feelings washed over her, too. Neither of them spoke. The air was thick with unvoiced thoughts. Chris cleared his throat. "Good morning," he whispered, the sound unfamiliar to him. "Hi," Ashley replied, her voice shaky. Chris's thoughts raced as he replayed the night in flashes. There had been too many moments where boundaries were crossed, leaving him feeling mixed between excitement and discomfort. Was this truly what he wanted? Ashley bit her lip, her mind racing. She felt strong yet vulnerable, unsure how to process what had occurred. They sat in silence until Chris tried to speak again. "So," he started but didn't find the right words. Ashley looked at him, understanding in her eyes. "Yeah," she murmured. "Last night was different," Chris finished, trying to find a way to express what they both felt. An uncomfortable silence lingered as they both searched for the right way to discuss the events of the previous night. "You had a few drinks, do you remember?" Chris began, but Ashley's expression changed, and he knew he'd approached the topic wrong. He had hoped to give her a way out, a reason to avoid talking about what happened. "I wasn't drunk," she said firmly. Her tone was soft but clear. "You let Clayton think he could break our rule, and when you didn't stop him, I thought that was fine with you." There was a hint of frustration in her voice. She wouldn't let Chris place the blame on her as if she was careless. Memories of last night flashed in her mind. Clayton's strong voice, his presence, the way she struggled in a moment that felt so complicated. She realized she couldn't outsmart him. Ashley understood everything had changed. What had started as Chris's idea was now their reality. She felt a mixture of excitement and confusion. Chris studied her closely, sensing the seriousness in her words. He exhaled deeply. How could he explain the truth? That it all started with a bet with Clayton? "We talked about the no-touching rule." Images of Clayton and Ashley filled his mind. "You looked so good, Ash. I didn't like the idea of sharing you, but you looked amazing." Ashley relaxed, a smile appearing on her face. She had worried Chris might regret everything. Instead, he revealed he was excited. She briefly thought about the idea of sharing, feeling a thrill at the thought. "I'm glad you felt that way," she whispered, her cheeks warm. "But are you really okay with what happened?" Chris swallowed hard, feeling a storm of emotions. He wanted to reassure Ashley and avoid a fight, but inside he was conflicted. It was intense, seeing you that way. His voice faded as he struggled with his thoughts. Ashley misread his hesitation as acceptance. "So you liked it?" she asked, uncertainty in her voice. Chris nodded quickly to spare her feelings. "Yeah, it was. Something," he replied, trying to sound more enthusiastic than he felt. Inside, guilt and envy were battling in him. Ashley felt a rush of emotions. She was both excited and nervous about what it could mean. "So do you want to—" She started but couldn't finish her thought. Chris, caught between frustration and wanting to keep the peace, blurted out, "Make you happy," his voice tight with unspoken feelings. As soon as the words left his mouth, Chris knew he had messed up. He wanted to express that he cared for her, but it came across as if he supported what had happened. Ashley's eyes widened with a mix of excitement and caution. "Really? You'd want more?" Her voice trembled slightly. Chris's mind raced. He needed to regain control of the situation. "We need some clear rules," he said quickly. "Real ones. We both stick to these boundaries unless we talk first," Chris reminded her firmly. Ashley nodded, reflecting on the intensity of last night. She could hardly believe Chris was open to discussing it. Was this where they had been headed all along? "No crossing certain lines," Chris added, wanting to prevent any misunderstandings. That was the limit they both agreed on, but he wondered if they were already too deep in this to turn back. Ashley agreed, though a mix of relief and uncertainty crossed her face. "Yes. I feel like there's still so much I don't fully understand. Things are moving fast, and I don't want us to rush into anything we might regret." Chris nodded, a tight feeling in his stomach. He wanted to share his own conflicted thoughts, but seeing the intensity in her eyes made him pause. What did you like the most about last night?" Ashley asked quietly, a spark of curiosity and intensity in her voice. Chris hesitated, taken off guard by the question. He hadn't considered it yet. Images from the night flashed through his mind, and he felt a blush creeping up. "I'm not sure. Maybe just seeing you so happy. You looked so alive, he admitted, feeling a bit embarrassed. Ashley studied his expression, surprised by his openness. She almost second-guessed continuing this, but she could tell he was being sincere. She relaxed, reaching out to take his hand as they shared the memory, feeling a quiet connection. What really made it meaningful, she whispered, was feeling so close to you, even through everything. That's what I loved most. Chris nodded, feeling a mixture of emotions but mostly gratitude for the trust between them. As they sat in quiet reflection, he realized that no matter what, they were both in this together, committed to understanding each other deeply. Chris looked into her eyes, feeling a rush of emotions he could barely process. He wasn't entirely sure if he believed what he was saying, but he admitted, yes, it was intense. Maybe the most intense thing I've ever seen. Ashley leaned forward, looking him straight in the eye. Is that really all you want? She asked with a knowing smile. Chris hesitated, unsure what she was implying. What do you mean? Ashley grinned, enjoying the effect her words were having. I mean, it doesn't seem fair if he gets all the attention, does it? She teased, playfully raising an eyebrow. Chris took a deep breath, feeling both excitement and uncertainty. Ashley kept her gaze on him, her confidence evident. What if there's more to explore? She asked quietly, letting her words sink in. Is that something you're open to? Chris's words were slow, his mind processing the possibilities. He couldn't ignore the rush of emotion swirling inside him. She nodded with a thoughtful smile. They both reflected on their feelings, wondering about the boundaries they had set. Ashley moved closer, reaching out to hold his hand as they considered their next steps together. For a moment, they shared a quiet understanding, feeling the depth of trust between them. Finally, Ashley leaned in, looking at him with a warm, steady gaze, and they both realized that whatever path they chose, they would face it together. Chris held Ashley's waist as she leaned close, whispering softly, Do you want to see it happen again? Chris felt a rush of mixed emotions, uncertainty, curiosity, and the excitement of exploring something new together. He took a deep breath, surprised by his own reaction. Yes, he said quietly, the words slipping out before he could even think it over. Ashley smiled, sensing his openness. She pressed her hand gently on his chest, meeting his gaze as they shared the moment. As they both reflected on the recent memories, they felt an undeniable closeness, connected by honesty and trust. Moving in rhythm together, they found a natural understanding, exchanging quiet glances and feeling a deep connection as they embraced. In that shared moment, everything seemed to fade away as they focused on each other, letting the conversation and any remaining doubts drift aside. They continued to find comfort in one another, enjoying the closeness and unity they had built. He reached down and pulled Ashley closer, and she leaned against him, feeling a rush of warmth. Ashley felt the intensity of the moment and sank against Chris, her breath quickening. Chris closed the door to his hotel room, the sound echoing in the quiet hallway. The bright morning sun felt too cheerful for the storm of thoughts inside him. As he walked towards his car, Ashley's words replayed in his mind alongside everything that had happened over the last day. Driving out of the hotel parking lot, still dazed, Chris barely noticed the sounds of tires squealing and horns honking behind him. He glanced back in the mirror at a car speeding through a red light, trying to catch up. What an idiot, Chris muttered, shaking his head. He focused on the road ahead as the events of the morning felt like a blur. He needed coffee, food, something familiar to ground him before work. Spotting Mabel's diner nearby, he turned in. Yet as he parked, a feeling settled in. Things felt different in his life. He hoped that after breakfast his thoughts might clear up, and everything could make sense after the chaos of the past day. But as he stepped out of the car, the weight of everything pressed heavily on him. Taking a deep breath, Chris pushed through the smudged glass door of Mabel's diner. The bell chimed overhead, and the air filled with the sounds of friendly conversations. The familiar smells of coffee and bacon surrounded him as he slid into a booth, the seat creaking beneath him. "What can I get you today?" the waitress asked, her hair escaping from a messy bun. "2 eggs over easy, bacon and toast," he replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Her name tag read Mabel, and she had a scent of cigarettes and strong perfume. Chris rubbed his temples, trying to shake off the memories that kept looping in his mind from the night before. While he waited for his food, Chris's thoughts drifted back to what happened in the hotel room. Ashley's voice echoed in his mind, as if she still wanted things to go a certain way. He wished he could go back and say a few things differently, hoping she might understand that he still had some doubts. Chris was stuck in his own thoughts, realizing he wanted something to happen again. He had tried to convince himself it wasn't true, but he couldn't anymore. It was his choice to ask Clayton to come to the room. The sound of plates clattering brought Chris back to reality. Mabel placed his breakfast in front of him, and the smell of crispy bacon helped him focus. "Anything else?" she asked, as she started to walk away. Chris just nodded and said quietly, "Thanks," reaching for his fork. As he cut into the golden yolk, it spilled across his plate, and memories of the previous night surged back. He had only meant to watch. That's what he kept telling himself, but he couldn't help remembering Ashley's flushed face and the sound of her pleasure, along with Clayton's strong presence. With each memory, a wave of discomfort rolled through him, tightening his grip on the fork. Yet, as he recalled those moments, Chris felt an unsettling warmth spread through him, his breath quickening and his heart racing. Despite the unease in his stomach, he felt a familiar sense of attraction. He wondered, for what felt like the millionth time, if he had enjoyed last night more than he wanted to admit. Then, a surprising image flashed in his mind, one that didn't happen. Ashley and Clayton together, lost in passion. It was vivid and intense, more than he expected. His coffee cup froze in midair as he pictured Clayton's confidence and Ashley's response, so real that it took him by surprise. A small voice in his head protested, saying this wasn't what they agreed on, that it was too much. But as the imagined scene played out in detail, Chris realized he couldn't push it away. He found himself caught between his discomfort and a sense of excitement. He set down his fork, feeling suddenly queasy. How could he balance these mixed feelings? More importantly, how could he face Clayton at work later? Overwhelmed, Chris knew he had to clear his head. He called for the check, his mind racing. He left a tip on the table, then, making sure no one was watching, he stood up and headed for the door. As he walked to his car, he fumbled for his phone and dialed Ashley's number, still feeling the weight of his tangled thoughts. He really wanted to hear her voice, to tell her she meant everything to him. The call went straight to voicemail, leaving him alone with his thoughts about feelings he never expected to have. Clayton leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, staring at the computer screen. The audio from Chris's phone was filled with static, and now and then he could hear faint, unclear voices. He frowned. The phone was too far away to catch anything important. "Darn," he said quietly, sitting up and tapping on his desk in frustration. He had hoped to understand how Chris and Ashley felt about last night and plan his next move, but technology was not working in his favor. He closed his eyes and smiled to himself. He still felt thrilled about the events of the previous evening. Everything had gone even better than he anticipated. He could picture their shocked and excited expressions, the pause right before they embraced the moment. The memory of Ashley was still vivid, along with Chris's mixed feelings captivating. One step at a time, he told himself, opening his eyes and pushing aside other thoughts to focus on his work. He had always been patient, which helped him in both business and his personal life. The situation with Chris and Ashley required careful handling, a way to keep them engaged without them realizing how invested they were becoming. He pulled up his calendar to review the upcoming week. Meetings needed to be scheduled, and subtle hints needed to be dropped. The couple was now more open, caught between wanting more and feeling unsure. It was time to push things a little further to see how they would respond. Ideas buzzed in Clayton's mind, from suggesting a business dinner with some light-hearted banter to maybe planning a weekend getaway under the idea of team building, where they could relax away from prying eyes. Suddenly, a note on his calendar caught his attention. Chris and Ashley were planning a gathering at their house next week. He had almost forgotten about it. Chris had mentioned it casually last week and even asked him what kind of grill to buy. It seemed the couple was becoming more confident with their finances. He knew they would soon feel trapped if they had to return to living paycheck to paycheck. Clayton thought about how the evening might unfold. He could certainly offer them drinks, but he was tired of that approach. It was time for them to open up on their own. Maybe he could arrive early to help set up the party and see where things led. The same place where she and Chris had shared their dreams every night. This is almost too easy, he chuckled to himself, leaning forward at his desk and turning up the sound on his computer. He listened carefully, eager to catch every word and hint in their voices. Each detail might help him with his carefully planned strategy. Then, the static noise faded. Though it was still hard to hear, there was no mistaking the sound of Ashley's voice coming through. Clayton smiled wide, feeling a wave of success. It seemed their chat had reached an exciting moment, opening doors to new possibilities. He leaned back in his chair, enjoying the moment. This was just the start, but soon, very soon, everything he wanted would be within reach. This feeling of power and control was thrilling, seeing others bend to his wishes. From the diner, Chris drove to the office. As he entered the parking lot, a dark car passed by. A fleeting worry hit him, but he brushed it off as just a coincidence. The car was gone quickly, and Chris had more important matters, facing Clayton. He parked, still reeling from the surprising news at the diner. He couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that things were getting too complicated, realizing how dangerous it would be to let things go further with Clayton. By all accounts, Chris had a near-perfect life. He was thriving at work and had a key role in BitGuardian's success. His relationship with Ashley was wonderful. Everything felt great. It would be foolish to risk any of that. But as he walked into the office, he couldn't help but picture troubling thoughts about Clayton. Shaking his head, Chris took a deep breath, trying to prepare himself for the workday and the unavoidable talk with Clayton. The office was quiet, strangely so, for a weekend. Most of the team was there, focused on their computers. Chris headed to his desk, casting quick looks towards Clayton's office. Through the open door, he saw Clayton pacing with a phone to his ear, animatedly talking with his hands. Chris struggled to concentrate. His mind kept swirling with thoughts about last night and his mixed feelings. He found himself glancing at Clayton, hoping to see some sign of regret, though he knew he wouldn't find any. Clayton was fully in control, just as he had been last night, just as he was now. Rising from his desk, Chris realized he needed to confront Clayton and set some limits. As Chris walked toward Clayton's office, he felt unsure. His mind was filled with troubling thoughts. Images of Ashley came to him, and he imagined her looking lost, overwhelmed by strong feelings. He pictured Clayton looking over at him, smirking with confidence. "She loves it, buddy," he imagined Clayton saying. Suddenly, a buzz from his phone broke his thoughts. It was a message from Ashley, adding to his confusion. "Sorry I missed your call. I was out shopping for the dinner party next week before work." Before Chris could reply, another message came through. "What do you think?" He gasped at the photo. Ashley stood in front of a mirror wearing a lovely blue outfit that fit her nicely. The light seemed to highlight her curves beautifully. She looked over her shoulder with a playful smile, her hair cascading down her back, and her eyes sparkling. Chris felt his heart race as he admired the picture of his beautiful wife. It was a welcome distraction from his worries. "Wow, Ash, you look fantastic," he texted back, feeling a mix of emotions. How had their relationship changed so much in just a few months? "I know you love blue. If you're good, maybe after the party you'll get a surprise." Chris couldn't believe his luck. Before he could think of a good reply, the 3 dots showed that Ashley was typing again. "Or should I wear it to the party and let everyone see?" He was surprised at how good Ashley had become at playful banter, but that thought made him uneasy. It stirred up images he didn't want to think about. "As tempting as that sounds, I'd really like to have you all to myself," he replied quickly, wanting to steer the conversation in a different direction. Can't wait." Chris smiled as he read Ashley's message. It brought a brief moment of joy that lifted his spirits. But then another message came in, pulling him back to reality. "I'm about to walk into work, love. Was there something you wanted to talk about?" "Just wanted to say I miss you already, and can't wait to see you when I get home. I love you." He put his phone away, feeling warmth from his exchange with Ashley. He turned to see his boss, Clayton, sitting at his desk, deep in thought. After what felt like a long wait, Clayton stepped out of his office. He looked surprised to see Chris, but quickly exchanged it for a confident smile that made Chris uneasy. "Chris, I didn't know if I'd see you today after last night," Clayton said, his tone casual but with an edge that made Chris feel uneasy. "Everything all right?" Trying to look calm, Chris replied, "Yeah, all good. Just didn't want to fall behind on anything," avoiding Clayton's gaze. Clayton studied him closely before he said, "About last night." Chris jumped in. "Let's not talk about it here." Clayton raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile forming. "If you insist," he said lightly, though his eyes were sharp. "But I meant what I said when I was leaving." Before Chris could respond, the phone on Clayton's desk buzzed. Clayton looked at the screen, and his demeanor changed. "Not again," he muttered, turning to his office. "You weren't joking. That guy is persistent." Chris felt a twist of worry. What could Tom want with Clayton? He followed Clayton into the office, but Clayton held up his hand. "Give me a moment. I'll talk to him and call you in," he said with a wink and shut the door. Inside the office, Clayton was already chatting away. "Tom, my friend, did you make it home without any hassles?" Tom's laughter came through the speaker. "First class all the way, no problems at all." They exchanged a few more light words before Clayton smoothly turned the conversation to business. "So, what can I help you with today, Tom?" "Well, I'm calling about that plan we talked about at the party," Tom said, his tone becoming serious. "I've been thinking it over and I want to move ahead." Clayton leaned back in his chair and clicked away on his keyboard, quickly scrolling through Chris and Ashley's last conversation. "I appreciate your eagerness, Tom, but these things take time to organize." His eyes widened as he glanced at a picture Ashley sent. Chris had no idea who his wife really was. "You still there?" Tom's voice came through clearly, bringing Clayton back to the conversation as he quickly saved an image and sent it to his phone. "Yeah, just got distracted for a second," Clayton replied, staring at the photo of Ashley. He felt excited about the prospect of being with her, but patience was getting harder. "Listen," he said, focusing again. "He's already uneasy around you, especially with his wife nearby. We need to plan this carefully. I've almost got them." "Come on, Clay," Tom urged, a hint of impatience in his tone. "You bring them here, and I promise you they will be ready." "Tom, I understand, but just give me a little more time. We need to create a good situation." Clayton was growing frustrated. He had told the party guests that if he left Ashley alone that night, he would ensure Tom got some time with her when Chris was at Larkin. He hadn't expected Tom to be this eager. "You want a problem? How about I cancel the whole thing? You promised me at the party that." Clayton interrupted him, his fists hitting the desk. "Don't threaten me, Tom. Just because you and my dad go way back doesn't mean you can disrespect me. I told you I need time to think." Clayton glanced at the office door as Chris peeked inside. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes. Chris just stepped in. "Let me fill him in." As he was speaking, Chris entered the office, looking unsure. He sat down on the sofa in front of Clayton's desk, while Clayton sent the photo of Ashley to Tom. "Chris, we have a situation," Clayton said seriously. "The higher-ups at Larkin are upset about some security issues with BitGuardian. Tom thinks it would help if we went up there to calm them down." As Chris settled back on the sofa, Clayton's thoughts drifted back to his earlier talk with Tom. The chance to be with Ashley privately clearly meant more to him than Clayton had thought. Now he just needed to align everything. "Both of us?" Chris echoed, doubt creeping into his voice. "I'm not good with the technical stuff. I'm not sure how helpful I'd be." "Yes, both of you. This is urgent." Tom's voice boomed from the speakerphone. He had caught on to what Clayton was doing but chose to push aggressively. Clayton leaned in, making eye contact with Chris. He decided to take the role of the supportive friend. "Your connection with them is much more important than my tech talk. They trust you, Chris." Inside, Clayton couldn't help but smirk at the irony of trust, given his own plans for the situation. He continued, realizing he needed to make things work. "How about you bring Ashley along? We could stay a few extra days. You two could enjoy a little getaway." Chris tensed at the mention of Ashley. Clayton held his breath, hoping Tom wouldn't say anything that might ruin their plans. He saw Chris struggling internally, knowing he was hitting the right notes. What are their concerns? Chris was skilled at his job, but seemed to overlook Clayton's influence. It's probably the same worries they've had all along. They fear someone could misuse the system and access private info from other clients that don't use the program. Exactly, Tom interjected again. I barely managed to delay their decision. They feel like you haven't been honest with them, Chris. You were just here. Why didn't you bring this up at the party? That's not important now. What matters is where we are at this moment. Clayton wanted to steer the talk away before Chris figured out what was really going on. All right, I suppose that could work, Chris finally admitted. A sense of victory filled Clayton as everything fell into place. He would fulfill his promise to Tom and deepen Chris and Ashley's involvement in his plans. He knew the possibilities this trip could bring, but he kept his emotions in check. Great. We'll figure it out, Chris. For BitGuardian, for Larkin Industries, and for us, Clayton said, the deeper meaning going unnoticed by Chris. After saying goodbye to Tom, promising they would leave as soon as they could, he sighed and turned to Chris. Relax, Clayton said, locking eyes with him. We'll sort it out. Larkin is a large company. They often act in their own interests. It's mostly just investors making loud complaints. Chris let out a breath he realized he had been holding. Thanks, man. I honestly don't know how useful I'll be, but I appreciate your trust in me. Clayton watched him closely. Chris seemed more anxious than usual. Something was definitely bothering him. Are you okay? You don't look great. Chris felt disoriented at that question. His heart raced, reminding himself he had to tell Clayton that things couldn't go further with Ashley. Yeah, just tired. Last night was. Well, you know, Chris said with a nervous laugh. Clayton chuckled, sending a chill through Chris. Yeah, I know, he responded, a teasing tone in his voice. You have quite a partner there, Clayton added with a playful look. Maybe you should head home. We can talk about Ashford on Monday. As Chris stood to leave, Clayton called out, Oh, and Chris, looking forward to that backyard gathering. It's going to be interesting. Chris nodded quietly and left the office, his mind swirling with mixed thoughts and feelings. Why hadn't he mentioned the limits they had? Why did he let things go in that direction? The ride home felt long and overwhelming. He struggled to distinguish between reality and what could have been. He felt both scared and excited as different possibilities filled his mind. Ashley stepped out of her car and locked it with her new BMW key. Her thoughts raced from the previous night and her earlier chat with Chris. With each step she took toward the hospital entrance, her confidence grew. Last night had brought surprises, but Ashley couldn't deny the thrill she felt. The attention from both Chris and Clayton awakened something in her she hadn't realized was missing. It wasn't about romance. It was about feeling desired and admired. She paused, recalling the rush of emotions from being with them. The warmth and connection made her shiver even now. A sudden memory rushed back to her. Chris, looking at her with a fierce expression she rarely saw, lifting her up as if holding her close. The memory of that moment caught her breath. Then she thought of Clayton. Ashley felt a flush as she remembered the moments they had shared, the playful back and forth they had over the past few months, and how last night had taken that to a new level. She shook her head to clear her thoughts as she walked toward the nurse's station, suddenly aware of a warm feeling inside. For a brief moment, Ashley recalled Chris agreeing to change the no-touching rule. She was surprised that he and Clayton discussed it without her, but she hoped it was just the excitement of the moment. She quickly dismissed any worry about whether he would cross another boundary, feeling secure in their understanding. As she entered the nurse's station, feeling upbeat, she realized that planning their little game was actually enjoyable. The playful teasing and flirty messages added a new spark to their connection. Johnson smiled knowingly. Eventful can mean many things. I can see it written all over your face. But remember, change can be good. Ashley nodded, feeling comforted by the kind words. It was nice to share this moment with someone who cared. Yes, I guess it can be, she replied softly, thinking about everything that had happened recently. As she checked Mrs. Johnson's vitals, Ashley's thoughts drifted again, but this time to how much she valued these small interactions. Each moment spent caring for her patients filled her with a sense of purpose. It was fulfilling in a way she hadn't fully understood until now. Have you been keeping busy? Mrs. Johnson asked, her voice warm with concern. Very much so. Just the usual work, Ashley said, smiling. But there's always something new to learn. That's the spirit, the elderly woman encouraged. Always keep your heart open to new experiences. Ashley realized how much she appreciated Mrs. Johnson's wisdom. The conversations they shared made her feel more centered. As the shift ended, Ashley felt lighter. She took a moment to breathe deeply, grateful for the day. She knew she could handle whatever came next. With those positive thoughts, she headed home, ready to embrace the changes ahead. Johnson swatted Ashley's hand. "Oh, don't give me that nonsense. Unless you're going to find me that fine doctor with a nice smile, I need some details." Ashley smiled, glad that Mrs. Johnson was there. She admired how the woman always spoke her mind. "You're so bold," Ashley laughed, glancing at the closed door to ensure they had some privacy. "Well, if you must know," Ashley said as she grabbed a stool with her foot and rolled it over to sit next to the elderly woman, "you may have been right about Chris. Things have moved forward." Mrs. Johnson's eyes lit up, feeling like a teenager again caught up in the latest gossip. "Oh, you cheeky girl," Mrs. Johnson laughed. "So did you two have a big moment?" "Oh my gosh." Ashley's face turned bright red with embarrassment. "No, and please keep your voice down. There hasn't been anything like that yet." Ashley immediately regretted saying that. It just slipped out. But once she said it, it lingered in the air, stirring feelings she wasn't ready to face. Ashley cleared her throat and went on. "No, that's not happening, but last night." She began to share what happened, and Mrs. Johnson listened eagerly. Once Ashley started sharing with the elderly woman, the words flowed easily. She told her everything. The flirty messages and pictures leading up to the night, dancing and meeting new people, to finally lying back on the bed, feeling exhausted, overwhelmed by it all. Little did Ashley know, though, they weren't the only ones sharing a moment. The janitor was in the room next door and heard the two women giggling. As he moved closer to the thin wall, the shared air vent above helped him hear even better. A smile crept onto his face. Right then and there, everything he thought about Ashley changed. She wasn't just some lonely wife. This was much more interesting than that. He had seen couples like this before, and now he felt he understood all he needed to know about the young couple. My, it sounds like you've had quite an experience, dear. Isn't it exciting to explore things in such a free way? You get to try new things and discover more about yourself with your husband's support." Ashley found herself nodding almost too eagerly. "It was definitely exciting," she said with a chuckle, "but I still feel a little guilty about it. Even after our talk this morning, when he reassured me that everything was all right and that he had a good time." Mrs. Johnson reached over and gently patted her hand. "It's normal to feel guilty at first, but don't forget you're not doing anything wrong. Besides, it seems like this morning was even more special," she said with a kind smile, remembering her younger days. "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. I knew I could count on you to understand." Ashley gave her hand a soft squeeze as she got ready to leave. "Of course, dear. Now go find me that orderly. You know, the one who's strong." Ashley laughed and waved goodbye, feeling even better about the night before. Ashley leaned against a row of lockers, ready to end her day. The back of her scrub top had lifted a bit, and the cool metal felt surprising against her skin. She thought about her earlier conversation with Mrs. Johnson and how easily the words had come out. It felt freeing to share things she didn't even know she wanted to say. But with that freedom came a bit of worry about what others might think, about losing herself, and about changing things forever with Chris. The attention from both Chris and Clayton was thrilling, but she wondered if it was the attention or the sense of control that excited her. Knowing she had the ability to attract two men, including one who was often praised for his charm, felt empowering. She took a deep breath and pushed away from the wall, adjusting her scrubs. Whatever happened next, she was ready to face it with clarity and a strong bond with Chris. Chris wiped his forehead as he pulled out yet another box of decorations from the garage. "I think that's the last one," he called out to Ashley, who was busy preparing snacks in the kitchen. "Great," Ashley replied, her voice slightly muffled. "Can you start hanging the patio lights?" While Chris untangled the string lights, Ashley stepped out of the kitchen, her gaze drifting somewhere above his shoulder. "So who's coming again?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe with a thoughtful look. Chris paused to count in his mind. "Well, there's Mike and Sarah from accounting, Tom from HR, "A few guys from my team," he said, his voice faltering slightly as he added. "And Clayton, of course." Ashley raised an eyebrow, a playful sparkle in her eye as she focused back on him. "Oh, Clayton's coming? What should I wear?" she joked, lifting her shirt slightly. Chris laughed, a bit surprised by Ashley's playful teasing, and fumbled with the lights. The string slipped from his hands, landing in a tangled mess on the floor. Ashley chuckled, her eyes sparkling with laughter. "Oh dear, having a little trouble there? Maybe we should ask that nice janitor from the hospital to help us set up. I'm sure I could find a way to show my appreciation," Chris said, a blush creeping onto his face. He walked quickly across the room and turned Ashley around gently. "Hey there," Ashley smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "What has you all worked up? Thinking about me and Clayton, or me and the janitor?" Chris's expression showed a mix of interest and a little jealousy. Without saying anything, he moved closer to Ashley, leaning in to softly kiss her neck. Ashley took a deep breath, her hands finding Chris's shoulders. "Oh," she said, tilting her head a little to let him in closer. "But what if Clayton wants to join again? I saw how much fun you both had last time." Chris pulled back, his eyes filled with mixed feelings. "Is that really what you want?" he asked in a low voice. Ashley hesitated, her heart racing. "Maybe," she whispered, a spark of defiance in her gaze. "Or maybe it's what you want. Did you enjoy watching me with him?" At that, Chris turned her around, kissing her deeply. His hands moved over her, pulling her close as if to erase any thoughts of Clayton. Ashley teased, "So many hands to consider." For a moment, Chris was taken aback, but then he became more intense, his touches filled with need. He lifted Ashley, her legs wrapping around him as he carried her to the couch. He took a moment before focusing on her again, his touches growing more urgent. He laid Ashley down gently. As Chris settled next to her, she could feel his warmth against her. "You feel so good," she said, her voice full of excitement. Chris kissed her neck, becoming more playful as he continued to shower her with light kisses. There was a hint of jealousy in him, thinking about anyone else being close to her. "And what about the janitor?" Ashley said softly, teasingly. "Do you think he wants to be close to me too?" Chris tightened his grip on her, the idea stirring something inside him. He didn't want to think about it, but the thought made him feel alive. "You're driving me wild," Chris said, his voice low and full of emotion. Ashley smiled, running her fingers through his hair as they both enjoyed the moment together. Ashley knew she was testing boundaries, but she enjoyed seeing Chris's reaction. She leaned closer and whispered, "You like getting this possessive, don't you?" Chris looked into her eyes, sensing the playfulness behind her words. He could feel the intensity in her gaze, a silent challenge. Was she teasing him? Testing his response? "Yes," Chris replied with a deep breath, feeling a surge of emotion. He reached for her hand, and they moved together, guided by their trust and connection. As they shared a close embrace, Ashley glanced back at him, her eyes reflecting warmth and a spark of excitement. She mentioned the idea of adding another person, playfully challenging him with the suggestion, though Chris could tell she was mainly interested in his response. Chris took a breath, steadying himself, feeling both surprised and intrigued by her playful tone. They held on to each other, finding a rhythm in their connection as they laughed quietly together. Ashley leaned into his touch, feeling reassured by the trust between them. They shared a quiet, deep understanding, each feeling a rush of excitement tempered by mutual respect and affection. For a long moment they remained close, savoring the comfort and connection they shared. "Please, keep going. I want to feel every moment." With one final push, Chris was fully with her. The movement made her cry out suddenly. He could feel her body tighten around him, shaking with the strength of her pleasure. Ashley's mouth opened wide as Chris let go of her hand. "Oh yes!" she exclaimed. A powerful wave of joy rushed through her, making her whole body tense before she leaned forward onto the sofa. Chris soon followed her, trembling as he reached his peak. He collapsed on top of her, trying to catch his breath with quick gasps. As they began to breathe normally again, Chris and Ashley lay together on the couch, feeling the warmth from their earlier activity slowly fade. Chris stroked Ashley's back, still in a state of amazement from their playful moment. "I don't think I've ever seen you so excited before," Chris whispered, a mix of wonder and uncertainty in his voice. Ashley sat up, a playful glint in her eye. What can I say? The idea of Clayton and the janitor at the same time really sparks my imagination, she teased lightly, with a hint of something else. Chris paused, his hand on her back. He took a deep breath, trying to find his words. I've been thinking. He could hear his heart racing in his ears. If you wanted to, do you want to? He stopped abruptly, the words caught in his throat as Ashley looked at him. In that moment, he lost his nerve. The question felt too heavy to voice. Want to what? Ashley asked, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. Chris forced a laugh and shook his head. The party. We should probably finish getting ready for it. Those lights won't hang themselves. He stumbled through getting dressed, feeling like he had let an important moment slip away. Ashley looked at him with interest, sensing his change in mood, but she said nothing more. Chris turned back to the party preparations, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying their conversation and wondering what Ashley might have said if he had found the courage to finish his thought. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching! Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.